This story of survival in an apocalyptic world kicks off with a harsh betrayal. The protagonist, Zhang Xiaoyang, finds himself suspended precariously above a cage packed with ravenous zombies. As if the situation wasn't dire enough, his ex-girlfriend sneers at him, taunting him about the deaths of all his friends. Her mockery reaches its peak as she assures him that his pathetic life is also nearing its end. Soon to be just another addition to the carnage below. As Xie Yang reflects on his misfortune, guilt and regret gnaw at him. He curses himself for trusting this treacherous woman, someone he now believes deserves a fate far worse than his. In her eyes, however, Xie Yang's threats are meaningless. She's moved on to a wealthier, stronger man and tasks him with disposing of her former lover. Her new partner, a corpulent man named Lu Kong, eagerly agrees to the plan. He even suggests dragging out Xiaoyang's torment for her amusement. Before pushing the button that would seal Xiaoyi's fate, Fatty smugly thanked him for his generosity, gloating about the supplies they'd looted from him, which would keep them comfortable for months. With that, Xie Yang was sent, plummeting into the zombie pit. The frenzied zombies, driven by an insatiable hunger, swarmed Xiang instantly. As agony overtook him, he clung to a desperate thought. If he could live his life again, he would make both Kejing and Lai Shuzang pay dearly for their betrayal. Suddenly, Xie Yang jolted awake to the grating sound of Tue Jing's voice. She was nagging him, demanding to know why he hadn't added her name to the deed of his house. For a moment, he was disoriented. Was this a dream? Had he somehow gone back in time to before the apocalypse? Memories of his previous life flooded back. Kejing had conned him, stripping him of his parents' inheritance, and leaving him homeless. Shortly after, the apocalypse descended, unleashing a global catastrophe that turned humans into mindless, flesh-hungry zombies. Despite the chaos, Xie Yang had managed to survive thanks to his resilience and the help of loyal friends. Together, they established a safe haven, fortified and well-stocked, where they could live without fear of the undead. But just when things seemed stable, Xi Jing returned, feigning desperation to win his sympathy. Xie Yang, blinded by her deception, let her in, only for her to betray him once more. She sabotaged the safe zone, allowing their enemies to breach the gates, leading to the destruction of everything they'd built. Now she was back, demanding an extravagant bride price and the deed to his home as if her betrayal had never happened. This time, however, Kejing was determined to take control. Though he kept his anger in check, he knew he needed a careful plan. Giving in to impulsive emotions could jeopardize everything. After pretending to agree to her demands, he sent Kejing away, leaving her stunned at his newfound confidence. And used to being defied, she couldn't understand how her obedient slave had suddenly become so assertive. With Jing out of the picture, Xiaoyang could finally focus. He had a month left before the apocalypse struck, and every second was precious. He vowed to prepare thoroughly this time, ensuring that no betrayal or misstep would threaten his survival. Then, something unexpected happened. A system notification popped up resembling a video game interface. Xiaoyang discovered he had activated an apocalypse system, which came with missions designed to help him survive. His first task was titled Apocalypse Preparation, requiring him to secure a piece of land and stockpile enough supplies for a year. Completing the mission would earn him 10 points, which could be exchanged for valuable rewards in the system store. Our protagonist was thrilled with the unexpected perk, the system's missions, and the rewards that came with completing them. What more could one ask for? However, the system store's offerings remained a mystery to him. It mostly stocked loot boxes and potions, such as those for boosting physical strength. Yet, his musings were interrupted by the loud growling of his stomach, reminding him he needed a proper meal. Reflecting on his past life, Xiaoyang recalled how he used to pinch every penny, starving himself to save for Kejing's bride price. But things are different now. Determined to indulge, he decided to treat himself to a luxurious meal. With the impending zombie apocalypse just a month away, he figured he should enjoy the finer things while they lasted. A few hours later, his delivery arrived. Xiaoyang marveled at the sight. It was a legendary Michelin 3-star takeaway. Never in his wildest dreams could he have afforded such a thing before. He eagerly dug into the $300 braised pork, savoring every bite. After surviving on scraps during the apocalypse, the taste was heavenly, almost surreal. But Xiang didn't stop there. He went into full food enthusiast mode, devouring dish after dish. His appetite seemed insatiable, and he nearly polished off everything when his phone rang. The caller, Xie Ke, Jing's friend. It seemed Kejing had wasted no time complaining to her. Xiaoyang reluctantly answered, only to be greeted by an ear-splitting tirade. Xiaoya bared him, questioning how he could dare to treat Sui Jing so poorly. She insisted Kejing was merely testing his love and claimed he had failed miserably. If he truly loved her, he'd prove it by handing over the deeds to his house and 1,000,000 yuan in cash as an apology. Xiaoya even offered to mediate with Jing if he complied. If not, he could expect a breakup. Ziyang's patience snapped. Who did she think she was to test him like this? Furious, he told her off and ended the call. He was done with greedy women who only cared about money. His priority, now, was to secure a suitable piece of land. He envisioned building an impregnable fortress, easy to defend and strategically located near water and forest. The following morning, Xiang visited a real estate agency. A friendly consultant greeted him, asking if he was looking to rent or buy. Xiang confidently replied that he was after something more valuable. Just then, the sales manager, Zhu, appeared and briskly ordered the consultant, Xiang, to help unload boxes of toilet paper. Despite Xiang's protest that she was assisting a customer, Manager Zhu dismissed Xiaoyang outright, deeming him a broke nobody in shabby clothes who wasn't worth their time. The manager's arrogance irked Xiang, who decided to put him in his place. He asked Zhu to repeat his words and explain his audacity in belittling others. Zhu, unfazed, doubled down, mocking Xiaoyang further. He even declared he'd eat a toilet on a live stream if Xiaoyang could afford to buy one. It was clear the manager was about to regret his words. Unbothered, Xiang smirked and advised Zhu to prepare for a feast of porcelain. He clarified he wasn't here for a house, but to buy land. The announcement stunned everyone present. It wasn't every day someone came to buy land outright. Xiang quickly invited Xiang to sit while she outlined the available options. Meanwhile, Manager Zhu glared in disbelief, convinced Xiaoyang was bluffing. Xiang presented detailed listings, but Xiaoyang wasn't interested in browsing. He outlined his requirements instead. Land near mountains and running water, preferably with existing factories or large buildings. Xiang promised to check for suitable options. Manager Zhu, unable to resist butting in again, suggested a property in the Eastern District. Xiang hesitated, pointing out that the area known as T-City land was filled with unfinished projects and abandoned factories, making it unsuitable for most buyers. Zhu dismissed her concerns, claiming no real customers had shown up anyway, and he suspected Xiaoyang was just wasting their time. Xiaoyang didn't care about the location as long as the land met his needs. He didn't mind the unfinished factories. Actually, they were a bonus since they would save him time and money. After reviewing the details, Xiang confirmed that the land was exactly what he wanted. Without hesitation, he agreed to buy it. He was ready to sign the contract and make the payment. Xiang was shocked. No one in their right mind would buy land with incomplete factories. But Xiang stood firm. He even urged her to hurry up because, as he put it, someone here is eager to eat some fresh poop. Manager Zhu stood there holding the check, unable to wrap his head around what he was seeing. How is it even possible for this scrappy guy to pay 300,000 for land with old rundown factories? It made no sense to him. Before leaving, Xiang had reminded him of the payment. Now, it was time for Zhu to fulfill his part of the deal. Meanwhile, other customers in the store were urging the manager to hurry up as the stream had already started. One guy, whose stomach wasn't feeling too great, promised to at least make it fresh for the stream. Xiang had completed the first task. The next step was to figure out how to turn the land purchase into a real business by gathering supplies. As he was leaving the real estate office, an old acquaintance, Laik Shong, spotted him and couldn't help but wonder what Xiaoyang was up to. But all thoughts flew out of his head when he saw what was going on inside. Manager Zhu was now being pressured by the staff and customers to keep his word, all while begging for help and desperately explaining he didn't want to go through with it. Meanwhile, Kajing was living carefree, painting her nails and enjoying the quiet life. That's when she got a call from Fatty, who asked if she knew Xiaoyang had just bought land at the real estate company. Shocked, she wondered where he had gotten so much money from. Fatty speculated it was probably the money he'd saved for the bride price. Sui Jing was furious. She couldn't believe Xiaoyang would use her money for something like that. Lu Cheng urged her to stay calm and go talk to Xiaoyang about it. But Kajing's anger was blinding. She wasn't going to ask him anything. She was going to confront him. Back at his home, Xiaoyang was deep in thought about how to fund the supplies he needed to start building. Just then, there was a loud knock on the door. It was Kajing with her friend, still fuming over Xiaoyang's use of her money. Xiaoyang had no idea what she was talking about, and Kajing, with fire in her eyes, accused him of spending the bride price money to buy land. She claimed that since the money came from her, the land was hers too. Xiaoyang, stunned by her accusations, didn't know how to respond. Finally, he decided to give her a straightforward explanation. He had plenty of money, but none of it would go toward her. He also knew about her little fling with Lu Kong. Kajing was baffled, not understanding how he knew. But her friend, sensing where the conversation was heading, suggested they calm down and resolve the misunderstanding. Xiaoyang, however, wasn't having it. There's no misunderstanding here, he said. Su Jing isn't my girlfriend. She's just a doormat for that old fat guy. He slammed the door in their faces. Tired of the drama, Kajing still couldn't understand how he knew about her and Li Shukong. Her friend was just as confused, wondering why Kajing hadn't told her about her relationship with Li Shuzong. Kajing quickly assured her it was nothing serious, just a few room rentals here and there. With things escalating out of control, they decided to head home and figure out their next move. But now, Shirao Yao was thinking of taking things into her own hands and winning Shirao Yang over. After all, they were good friends. The following day, Shi Yang arrived at his new property with a construction crew. He was ready to rebuild one of the factories, but wasn't sure how long it would take. Foreman Li quickly assessed the situation and explained that reinforcing the walls, setting up defensive towers, installing barbed wire, thickening the steel doors, and adding bulletproof glass would take some time. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of enemy Xiang had made to need such heavy fortifications. Shi Yang just waved him off, telling him that some things were better left unknown. He wanted to know how much it would cost to finish the project in a month. The foreman shook his head, stating that it couldn't be done that quickly. Xiaoyang wasn't fazed, saying he had connections who could get the job done faster. The foreman, standing his ground, said that the safety of the workers was more important. This took Xiaoyang by surprise. He had never met a foreman with a conscience. It turned out, though, that the cost would just be higher. Shi Yang asked him to give him the price without further delays. After some quick calculations, Foreman Li estimated that if they were to finish in a month, the workers would need to work nonstop, and the cost would come to 20 million yuan. They'd also require a 5 million yuan deposit to start immediately. Xiang didn't find this ideal. He told them to get started right away, and he'd transfer the rest of the payment within a week. The construction company had nothing to fear. If he failed to pay, the land would be theirs. Out of nowhere, Xiaoya appeared at the construction site. She confidently walked up to him, wrapped her arm around his, and asked, "What are you doing here?" Xiaoyan was already tired of this woman. In his past life, she along with Kajing had driven him out of his parents' inheritance, and now he was ready to make her pay twice as much for everything she had done. No matter how much she pretended to be a good girl, he could see through her rotten nature. Xiaoya, seeing the construction site, asked with feigned interest, "Is this the land you bought? It's so beautiful here. I bet you want to build a villa, right?" But Xiaoyang didn't care about her assumptions or thoughts on what he should do with the land. Her attempts to act like she cared made him feel nothing but disgust. She couldn't understand his cold response. Normally, just a gentle touch from her on his arm would have made him nervous. But today, he didn't even flinch. Instead, he turned away from her indifferently, walking over to the construction workers to instruct them on fixing the gate, which needed to be widened. Xiaoya couldn't miss this opportunity. After Kajing had ruined everything for Xiang, she thought this land might now be her chance. Xiaoyang returned home, his mind racing with ideas on how to get more money. After he had mortgaged his house, he received a loan of 3 million yuan. But that amount was barely enough to cover the first phase of construction. Still, considering the inevitable collapse of the world, he reasoned that it wouldn't matter. If he sold the house to a few buyers, it would be no problem. It was something that had to be dealt with no matter what. Then there was a knock on the door. Xiaoyang opened it to find his infuriating neighbor, Grandpa Li, standing there. This old man who lived downstairs was a wealthy, greedy person who owned the apartments on the first and second floors. He had been trying to buy the third floor from Xiang, but Xiaoyang refused to sell. As a result, Grandpa Li had started making life difficult for him, painting the doors, scattering trash, leaving coffins by his doorstep, and jamming locks. The old man had done everything in his power to harass Xiang, and now he was accusing him of throwing a party the night before. Xiaoyang, however, had gone to bed early and hadn't made any noise, but there was no point in arguing over the false accusation. Xiang knew what Grandpa Li really wanted his house. So, pretending to be fed up, he told the old man he was ready to sell. Grandpa Li, shocked and surprised, could hardly believe his ears. Xiang had a condition, though. He wanted to stay in the house for another 6 months until he found a new place to live. But the old man had to transfer 5 million yuan into his account immediately so he could pay the deposit for the new house. If Grandpa didn't agree to this, the deal was off. The greedy old man couldn't let the opportunity slip by. So, he agreed, but insisted on signing a contract to make sure Xiaoyang couldn't change his mind. Xiang had no issue with that. After all, the old man would still die in his house when the apocalypse began. Once Grandpa Li transferred the 5 million yuan, Xiang now had a total of 8 million yuan. 3 million from the loan and 5 million from the old man. It was time to tackle the next task and earn the reward. The biggest supermarket in the area was the perfect place to get started. Xiang set off to stock up on supplies for the coming year. The people around him watched him, thinking he was mentally unstable. They kept their distance as he pushed several grocery carts through the aisles. When he reached the checkout line, the onlookers laughed at him, thinking he was just another fool caught up in the doomsday rumors. But Xiang didn't care about their judgment. What mattered was completing the task that the system had set for him. And once he did, he earned 10 points. With those points, he bought a special supply box from the system store. Xie Yang didn't hesitate. When he opened the box, he found a level 1 space ring, a personal subspace of 500 cubic meters where time stood still, and anything stored there would never spoil. This was an incredible gain. The fact that time stopped inside the subspace meant he could store fresh food without worrying about it going bad. Along with a new item, Xiaoyang received a new mission, 10 years of sustenance, which would reward him with 20 points for completion. But just as he was starting to process his new acquisition, he was approached by the security chief of the supermarket, Yong Tao. Yong Tao, a former high school classmate, recognized Xiaoli. He had been the lackey of a local bully, extorting money from weaker students. Xie Yang had frequently clashed with him back in the day. Today, Shurao Yang didn't expect to run into Yong Tao here. Yong Tao insisted that Shurao Yang put everything back in its place, or else he wouldn't be kind. Shurao Yang responded that he hadn't changed at all and was still picking on the weaker ones. However, Xie Yang had no intention of returning the items. As a paying customer, he wasn't about to back down. Yong Tao immediately demanded Xiang pay for the goods right there and then, threatening that if he didn't, things would get worse. An hour later, all the cashiers had finally totaled the items. 56,000. Yong Tao wasted no time demanding the payment. Without hesitation, our hero used his credit card like a tool of power. The transaction was completed successfully, leaving the security chief stunned. Just as Yong Tao was about to leave, ready to let the matter go, Shurao Yang called him to wait. Xie Yang wasn't about to let slide. He wanted an apology for Yong Tao's rude behavior, or he'd return everything. The security chief thought it was unnecessary, but with so many witnesses around, he knew better than to ignore it. Everyone had seen everything unfold, and was fully on Xia's side. They filmed the incident, threatening to make Yong Tao infamous on the internet unless he apologized. Xie Yang even promised that if the apology was genuine, he'd buy 10 times the amount of goods. If Yong Tao didn't believe him, he could bring over the POS machine, and Xiaoyang would show him his account balance. When Yong Tao saw 7 million, his disbelief was evident. Xiaoyang only wanted an apology before he continued his shopping spree. Although the security chief struggled with his pride, the pressure was overwhelming and he gave in, apologizing. As Xia walked past, he gave a piece of advice. Think before you act next time. You never know how things will turn out. Yong Tao, now trying to act friendly, asked why Xiaoyang was buying so much. Xiaoyang dismissed him, saying it was none of his business and that he had big plans ahead. Yong Tao, seeing a business opportunity, offered his help. The supermarket didn't have enough stock for such a big deal, but he knew a wholesaler, Zhang Shenzha, who had shifted to the wholesale business. Yong Tao immediately contacted him, excited to introduce Xiaoyang as a potential big client. Xiaoyang quickly realized that some people just never change. Since Yong Tao and Zhang Shen's were still working together, he could only imagine how much they were exploiting the supermarket. Soon enough, they arrived at the wholesale warehouse. An expensive car pulled up. From the way Shangzi drove, Xie Yang knew this guy probably had never been deceived, and it was time to teach him a lesson. Although the arrogant Shangzi didn't immediately recognize him, Yong Tao reminded him they were schoolmates. After a moment of thinking, Shangzi finally remembered. He recalled Xie Yang as the guy who had a bit of a backbone back in school. Shangzi immediately judged him based on his cheap, non-designer clothes. He despised people who tried to act rich when they weren't. Turning to Yong Tao, Shans began criticizing him for bringing such an unworthy client. He even kicked Yong Tao on his ass, scolding him for wasting his time. Despite Yong's attempts to explain, Shans was convinced that Xie Yang couldn't possibly be rich. He had been in business long enough to spot who had money and who didn't. Shurao Yang, tired of the arrogance, called Shanghai, an ignorant person who looked down on others. Enraged, Shanzi grabbed him and demanded he take back what he said. Xie Yang wasn't scared at all and repeated his words, calling him ignorant. To his surprise, it wasn't the insult about being looked down on that upset Shangzi, but the accusation of being illiterate. It turned out that this arrogant man was far too sensitive about his lack of education. Yong Tao, seeing things escalating, stepped in quickly, warning Xiaoyang to be careful not to provoke Shanzi further. Don't push him. He's really sensitive about being called illiterate. But for his trouble, Yong Tao received another kick and more insults from Shanzi, who was furious that he couldn't do as he pleased. Shans faced our protagonist with an ultimatum. Either Xie Yang would purchase a massive shipment of goods, or he'd be forced to leave crawling on all fours. Xie Yang didn't seem fazed by the threat. He calmly instructed Shangzi to release his grip and requested the account details. Moments later, Shangzi's furious expression turned into shock as he realized Xie Yang had deposited $1 million into his account. Xiaoyang explained that this was just an initial payment. He intended to purchase 5 million worth of goods. Shenzhe asked about the specific items Xiang needed. Xi Yang listed basics like oil, rice, salt, snacks, and beverages, goods that had long shelf lives. A sly smile appeared on Jiang Shan's face. He had just received a batch of near-expired products, and this was the perfect chance to unload them onto Xia. When they arrived at the warehouse, Shanzi offered the entire stock at a 10% discount off the original price. The deal seemed too good to be true, and Shurao Yang immediately suspected something was off. Before agreeing, he decided to inspect the quality of the goods. True to his suspicions, it was a setup. Although the packaging looked fresh, the products were nearing their expiration dates. Jiang Shanzi hadn't expected Xiang to catch on so quickly, so he immediately offered a 50% discount, but Xi Yang wasn't satisfied. He was willing to spend his 5 million, but he expected top-quality goods. However, he had a different plan for these near-expired items. Xi Yang told Shangza he'd take the expired goods off his hands for half the price with one condition. He would pay in a month. Shangzi was taken aback, but Xi Yang quickly assured him that he'd use his house as collateral. Shangzi was confused, not understanding why Xi Yang would want expired food. He didn't realize that in the near future, these items would become a highly valuable resource. Xi Yang didn't explain further and simply instructed Jiang Shan to deliver the goods to the designated address. Just then, Xi Yang received a call about a house sale. He quickly bid farewell to Shang's and Yong Tao, heading off. The buyer was an elderly man who offered a 400,000 down payment and 3 months for Xi Yang to vacate. The deal seemed almost too smooth, making Xi Yang a little suspicious. He asked the old man why he was in such a rush. The man explained that his granddaughter needed to move for school, and Shurao Yang was the only one selling a property in the area. The old man was so upfront, even providing all the details willingly. Shurao Yang asked if he wasn't worried about the price being raised. The old man, realizing his slip, started pleading with Shaoli not to take advantage of him, as this was all his life savings. Xiao Yang, not want to exploit a genuine person, assured the old man that their deal was set and signed a contract. The old man was overjoyed, grateful that his granddaughter had a home, and even apologized for distracting Xiaoyang from his work. As Xi Yang observed the old man's kindness, he felt concerned. He didn't think the man and his granddaughter would survive the apocalypse for long. Before the man left, Shurao Yang asked for his address. Later, Shurao Yang visited his property where construction was progressing steadily. He checked with a foreman who confirmed that nearly 80% of the work was done. The walls and doors were reinforced just as Xiaoyang had requested, and the warehouse was ready for use. Excited by the progress, Shurao Yang immediately contacted Jiang Shanzi to expedite the delivery of the supplies. The warehouse, which looked more like an underground bunker, began filling up quickly. By evening, everything was in place under Xiang's meticulous supervision. Once the workers departed, Shurao Yang took a moment to inspect the work. Everything was on track, and he could finally relax. At that moment, the system sent a notification congratulating him for completing the task, earning him 20 system points. When he opened the system store, he found a new item available, abilities that could be awakened before the apocalypse. Without hesitation, Xiao Yang bought a box. Upon opening it, he unlocked a level 1 ability called Mind's Eye, which allowed him to detect hostility from others. Feeling satisfied with his new power, Xiang knew this would be invaluable in the early days of the apocalypse. Just as he began to unwind, the system sent him another task. Gather weapons, lots of them. Xiaoyang wasn't fazed. Arming himself was exactly what he had planned. It was time to get ready for the coming chaos. Sometime later, Xi Yang found himself at the heart of the city's late-night black market, ready to procure the weapons he needed. As he wandered through the bustling market, the constant noise of bargaining and the relentless chatter of customers and sellers filled the air. Everywhere he looked, there were hustlers trying to make quick bucks. Out of the corner of his eye, something caught his attention. Someone familiar. It was a man he had seen before during the first disaster. Lishuk. He was aggressively negotiating the price of some fake jewelry, wearing down the seller until he agreed to a much lower price. Xi Yang hadn't expected to run into this guy tonight, but it made sense that he would be here haggling over fake jewelry. It wasn't surprising that Sui Jing had been fooled by these worthless trinkets. After a few more steps, Xi Yang finally came across a stall that piqued his interest. Lined up in front of him were various blades, each one sharper than the last. A grin slowly spread across his face as he examined the weapons. He had finally found what he was looking for. Squatting down in front of the stall, he asked boldly if they had anything tougher. The man behind the counter, dressed in military camouflage, didn't seem to get the hint. In response, he tossed Xiaoyang a knife sharpener, suggesting he sharpen the blades himself if he wanted something tougher. Unfazed, Xiaoyang insisted that none of these knives were up to par. He needed something stronger. Realizing the implication, the vendor's demeanor shifted, his tone turning serious as he asked if Xiao Yang was looking for trouble. Just then, the sound of a phone notification interrupted the tension. Xiao Yang had just transferred 200,000 yuan to the seller's account. Holding up the receipt, he made it clear he was serious. The seller's attitude flipped instantly, as he acknowledged the transfer and reassured Xi Yang that he was indeed a serious buyer. The seller quickly called one of his men to watch over the stall, while he took Xiang to a more private location for the transaction. They entered an innocuous building nearby, where the seller started pitching some homemade guns. They were small, intended for target practice, priced at 2,000 with cheap ammo. Xiang turned him down immediately, which seemed to ignite a competitive spark in the seller. He then showed off some replica revolvers modeled after military handguns. For 5,000, Xi Yang could get a 9mm gun with bullets costing 5 each. Though Xiao Yang found the offer acceptable, he had already prepaid 200,000, so these options didn't interest him much. Curious about the prepayment, the seller asked what it meant. Xiao Yang explained that the earlier transfer was just a 10% deposit for a larger order worth 2 million. The seller, now a bit wary, questioned the young man's background. Xiao Yang quickly made up a story about how his subordinates usually handled these types of shady transactions. But he had come in person and didn't appreciate being questioned about his identity. Realizing that Xiao Yang must be involved in something serious, the seller urged him to wait. As he hurried off to a different room, he locked the door behind him and scanned the area through the window. Turning back to Xiang, he assured him he had come to the right person and that they would proceed with the deal at midnight, the day after tomorrow. He insisted on cash payment only. When Xiao Yang finally left the building, the seller treated him like a VIP. However, as fate would have it, he bumped into the same familiar face from earlier in the night market. Lu Kong couldn't help but comment on the coincidence. Now it made sense why Xi Yang had been spending so much. Lu Kong also suspected that Xiaoyi's involvement with Kajing had something to do with it. He figured the kid had recently picked up too many tips about finances and was now planning to sell everything and live a life of comfort. Young Xiao Yang paid no mind to the ramblings of the fatty, whose words were nothing more than empty noise. He figured it would be more practical to test out his newly unlocked ability. As he opened his mind's eye, a faint aura shimmered in his gaze. Above Mr. Cam's head, a symbol of happiness floated, while an angry one appeared above Luong. This power was definitely proving to be useful. To test it further, Xi Yang decided to speak out loud, mocking the fatty for buying cheap secondhand items just to deceive Kajing. He also pointed out that the girl was nothing more than his secondhand trash, just like the rest of the junk he was trying to pass off. The comment made the fatty's anger indicator turn even darker as he fired back with curses. Clearly irritated by the jab. Watching the situation escalate, Mr. Cam, eager to keep things under control, asked Xi Yang if that fat-ass man was bothering him. With a subtle nod, he labeled Lai Shuqiang as an enemy. A clear message. Mr. Cam quickly reassured his new important client that his staff would deal with the matter and teach the fatty a lesson. Xi Yang didn't mind, but advised him not to go too far since he still had plans for him in the future. As the group of muscular thugs approached the overweight man, his bravado disappeared. He stammered, his usual arrogance replaced with fear. Mr. Cam didn't waste any more time with the man. With a swift motion, he pulled out a baton, and the men quickly took care of the fatty, leaving him bruised and battered on the dark road. His white suit was now covered in shoe prints, and his face showed the evidence of a hard beating. The incident only deepened the fatty's hatred for Xiao Yang. 2 days later, the agreed-upon meeting was set at a warehouse, and both parties were punctual. In front of Xiao Yang, a truck full of suspicious crates awaited, exactly what he was hoping for. When his firearm arrived, signaling the success of his task, the system rewarded him with 10 points, bringing his total to 20. He eagerly opened the crates, revealing an arsenal of weapons, heavy rifles, pistols, and all the necessary gear. Then, unexpectedly, the system added a bonus, a +2 physical enhancement potion. Xiaoyang was pleasantly surprised by this bonus, especially since it was double the strength of the potions in the system store. Not wasting a moment, he injected the potion into his veins. He had expected a brief pinch, but the surge of power was far more intense than he anticipated. The pain was sharp and immediate as the enhancement spread through his body. With his physical score now boosted by 2 points, Xiong felt 40% stronger than before. Determined to make the most of this newfound strength, Xiaoyang checked out the system store once more and noticed another physical enhancement potion. Seeing the value of increasing his strength even more, he decided to take the plunge. After injecting the second potion, his physical score shot up to 8, making him 60% stronger than the average person. Excited to put his new power to the test, Xi Yang looked around the warehouse and spotted some thick iron bars that were scattered about. He grabbed one, a sturdy bar used in construction, and threw it into the air. With a powerful kick, he bent the rod significantly, sending it flying into the nearby wall with enough force to create a noticeable dent. His kick had been so powerful that it left a visible impression on the wall. With this level of strength, Xiong felt confident that he could handle anything, even the early stages of an apocalypse. As for the weapons, he knew better than to leave them exposed. Storing them safely in his spatial ring was the wisest move. With a simple gesture, he pointed the magical ring at the contents of the truck, and the weapons were absorbed into the ring instantly. The day after tomorrow, the apocalypse was set to begin. Time was running out, and Xiong still had a few things to wrap up. However, he couldn't shake the image of the old man who had tried to buy his house. The old man had offered what little savings he had to secure a future for his granddaughter. Xiong had been through countless battles and betrayals during the first apocalypse, but he'd never ignored the needs of the less fortunate. The least he could do was send some supplies to the old man and his granddaughter as a small token of repayment. The following day, Xiong found himself at a shabby apartment building located in a rundown area of another city. The building was in such bad condition that without a GPS, it would have been impossible to find. The old man had been renting in such a low-cost, dilapidated place, and without an elevator, it was clear he wasn't well off. His apartment was located on the top floor. Xiong knocked on the door, but then quickly realized he should probably remove the supplies from his storage ring, or explaining them would be difficult. Activating the ring, he watched as box after box of essential supplies materialized, filling the hallway with provisions. At that moment, the old man reached the door and opened it, expecting it to be the landlord. He quickly assumed the young man was here to collect the rent, promising to pay next week. But when he took a closer look, he realized it was Mr. Jiang. Behind him, boxes were piled up, filling the hallway and stretching up the stairs, making the old man even more confused. She had told him to wait until later for the full explanation. But for now, they needed to get the boxes inside before anyone noticed. After a few minutes of lifting, most of which Xiong did on his own, they managed to get everything in. The old man couldn't believe how easily the young man handled it, not even looking tired. Meanwhile, Shirao Yang was checking the space, trying to figure out if it could serve as a safe shelter. He decided it would do, especially since the front door was sturdy enough. Once everything was inside, Xiong turned to the old man, urging him to pay close attention. He explained that the supplies they brought needed to be rationed carefully because they were meant to last for about 6 months, starting tomorrow. Just as he was about to go into more detail, something caught his eye. A photo placed nearby. It was of the proud old man with a beautiful young woman, his granddaughter. To his surprise, the woman in the picture was none other than Li Shanshan, a close friend from his past during the first apocalypse. Xiong immediately asked the old man if the girl in the picture was named Shanshan. This puzzled the old man further as he hadn't mentioned her name to the young man before. Xiong's expression grew serious, and he quickly asked where Shanshan was now. The old man explained that she was still at school while they were finishing up the house paperwork. Xiong remembered how Shanshan had once regretted dragging her grandfather into the chaos during the early days of the first apocalypse. He recalled how her grandfather had risked everything to save her. In that doomed timeline, the old man had fought his way through a zombie-infested school to save Shanshan, only to die in the process. As someone who had been close to the old man in his past life, Xiong promised himself he wouldn't let that happen again. Turning to the old man, he declared that the house was no longer for sale. The old man panicked, thinking Mr. Jiang was backing out of the deal. But Xiaoyang gave him a chilling piece of news. The world would soon descend into chaos, and the house along with Shanshan's school wouldn't matter. The only thing that mattered now was getting Shanshan to safety. This sudden declaration only confused the old man further. Xiong realized he couldn't explain everything in detail right now. So, he decided to simplify things. He urged the old man to imagine the horrors of a famine. While it sounded terrifying, the old man couldn't grasp how this applied to their situation. Seeing that words weren't enough, Xiong decided to show him instead. With a simple gesture, he made all the supply boxes disappear, sucked into a storage ring in an instant. The room, once crowded with boxes, was now completely empty. The old man stared dumbfounded. Xiong calmly explained that he had special powers and could see the future. If the old man wanted to survive and save Shanshan, he needed to listen carefully and follow his lead. Their next task was to get Shanshan out of her school. As they drove there at full speed, the old man was still trying to process everything. His mouth opened in disbelief. Xiaoyang drove like a man on a mission, ignoring all traffic rules in his haste to get there. When they arrived, they found Shanshan surrounded by a group of students near one of the school buildings. She was being bullied by a couple of jealous girls. One slapped her across the face, while another kicked her in the stomach for daring to speak out. The situation was escalating, but the old man was too focused on reaching his granddaughter to notice the growing tension. As he ran toward Shan, the bullies shifted their attention to him. He yelled at them to stop hurting his granddaughter, but their attitude only grew more aggressive. A group of thugs stood in his way, showing their weapons and telling him to back off and let the girls handle things. Without hesitation, the old man charged forward, yelling at the young men for being heartless bullies. One of the thugs raised a steel bat and aimed it at the old man's head. It would have been a serious blow if it hit, but Yang reacted quickly, stepping in to stop the attack. He glanced at the thug with disdain, realizing that the younger generation still had a lot to learn about bullying. The other two thugs thought Yang was Shan's older brother and tried to threaten him, but Yang was ready. With a swift movement, he delivered a powerful kick to one of the thugs, knocking the wind out of him. The thug was sent flying through the air as though he had been shot out of a cannon. Watching his comrade get tossed around like that, the remaining two thugs hesitated. Yang clearly knew his way around a fight. Maybe if they teamed up, they could land a blow, but judging by the cold, calculating look in his eyes, it seemed unlikely. One thug approached from the front, armed with a knife, while the other snuck up from behind with a bat. It wasn't the most brilliant plan, but it was all they had. The first move came from the one with the bat, swinging it wildly. Yang, sensing the attack, easily dodged by ducking low. His enhanced body was already proving its worth. Thanks to the potions he'd taken to boost his physical abilities, his reflexes were on another level. He grabbed the thug by the collar, and with a swift motion, he slammed the thug into the ground, the impact knocking him out cold. Seeing his partner go down, the remaining thug rushed at Xiaoyang, knife in hand. Yang didn't even flinch as he deflected the weapon, locking eyes with a blonde thug in a chilling stare. With no hesitation, Yang prepared for another strike, kicking the thug on the side of his leg. The power behind the kick was enough to send him crumpling to the ground. In mere moments, the two wannabe tough guys were out of the picture. Now, Yang's focus shifted to the assaulted Shan for no reason. After surviving the brutal first apocalypse, Yang had adopted a mantra of equal rights, equal fights, so without warning, he slapped one of the girl across the face. The slap was forceful, sending a shiver through her and leaving her cheek red and stinging. As for the other who had been pulling Shan's hair, Xiaoyang decided she needed a taste of her own medicine. He didn't release his grip, no matter how much she begged. With a fierce glare, he drew the knife from the fallen thug and pressed it to her neck. Terrified, the girl's eyes widened with fear, and the next sound that rang out was a sharp slash followed by a gut-wrenching scream. Xiaoyang didn't even flinch. During the first apocalypse, he had done whatever it took to survive, and those instincts still guided him. The girl, now trembling, watched in shock as her friend collapsed to the ground, seemingly defeated and powerless. Don't worry, our protagonist isn't all that brutal. Well, not yet, at least. When faced with a bully, he didn't resort to anything too extreme. Instead, he just gave her a little haircut. Yep, right there in front of everyone, humiliating her completely. Did she learn her lesson? Not a chance. The bully, furious and hurried, screamed that she wouldn't let Yang get away with it. But he didn't even flinch at her empty threats. With an air of dominance, he glared at her crumpled figure on the ground, sprinkling the freshly cut locks over her head like confetti, a final touch of maximum disrespect. While everyone else stood around, baffled by his actions, Xiang calmly told her he'd done her a favor. According to him, long hair would only become a burden soon enough. The crowd didn't get it, but he seemed to know exactly what he was talking about. Shifting his focus to Xiang told her to get with them immediately. Inside the car, Grandpa Li told Shan that she is not going back to school anymore. The old man had a wild look in his eyes as he explained his reasoning. A massive famine is coming and survival has to be our top priority. Shan understandably thought her grandpa had lost it. She was convinced he'd fallen for some scam call or hoax. As they bickered in the back seat, Xiaoyang just watched, amused but relieved to see Shan safe. Finally, though, he spoke up, revealing the real reason for the urgency. The famine story was a lie. He made it up to simplify things for the old man. What was really coming was something much worse, something catastrophic. The apocalypse. He wasn't sugarcoating it anymore. He explained that in just a few days, modern civilization, as they knew it, would come to an end. Shan was skeptical at first, but before she could argue, Yang suggested she check her phone because she'll see the first signs of it now. And sure enough, the news confirmed it. A video popped up on Shan's screen showing absolute chaos at a crowded train station. A man was being restrained by authorities, screaming some eerily prophetic words about a strange toxic smog. What made it worse? He was biting people. Some thought it was rabies, but his lucidity suggested otherwise. Things spiraled out of control fast. The man broke free, attacking more people, and the scene turned into an outright nightmare. Xiaoyang's chilling words rang true. This was only the beginning. The first signs are already here, he said. Tomorrow will officially mark day one of the apocalypse. He explained that a mysterious toxic smog would begin spreading across several provinces, including Province B. The effects would be devastating. Mutations, madness, and worse. A significant portion of the population would turn into mindless zombies driven only by a hunger for flesh. And for the lucky ones who survive the smog, their fate wouldn't be much kinder. For Shan, the idea. Zombies weren't new. She'd seen them in movies, TV shows, and pop culture. But this wasn't fiction anymore. Still, it was hard to grasp the reality of it all. Yet, when the chaos erupted, whether tomorrow, next week, or the week after, there'd be no room for disbelief. On their journey back to headquarters, time was everything. But luck wasn't on their side. Traffic was backed up for miles. Even the emergency lane, usually a safe bet for getting through quickly, was jammed. Cars weren't moving, and the group's frustration was growing. The old man, already nervous, couldn't stop thinking about what Mr. Jang had mentioned earlier. The zombies, now stuck in a sea of stationary vehicles. His anxiety spiked. Yang tried to reassure him, saying they were safe for now, but even he couldn't dismiss the possibility of a small outbreak nearby. The situation worsened when a luxury car came speeding down the emergency lane. The driver, reckless and arrogant, seemed determined to bypass the chaos. As traffic inched forward, the car swerved sharply, trying to cut into Xiaoyang's lane. The move was sudden, almost causing a collision. Xiaoyang slammed on the brakes just in time, narrowly avoiding crash. Xiaoyang held his ground, refusing to let the car through, but the driver wasn't backing down. Pulling up beside Xiaoyu's window, he hurled insults and curses, acting as if he were the victim. The old man advised Xiliang to let it go, pointing out that the driver was likely wealthy and powerful. But Xiliang wasn't one to be intimidated. If this guy wanted trouble, Xiaoyang was ready to give it to him. For nearly an hour, they sat in that miserable traffic jam. When it finally cleared, they hoped the ordeal was over. It wasn't. The same luxury car was now behind them, tailgating aggressively. The driver wasn't just reckless. He was vengeful. This was no ordinary road rage. The car sped up, weaving dangerously close, attempting to provoke Xiaoyang. The old man pleaded with him to avoid escalating the situation. But Xiaoyang had had enough. The apocalypse was coming. Why tolerate scumbags anymore? Yang decided to play along, taunting the driver. He bet on the rich brat losing his nerve. And he was right. In a moment of recklessness, the luxury car swerved wildly, nearly crashing into a hill. Yet, even after almost wrecking, the driver refused to take responsibility. Instead, he called the traffic police, demanding surveillance footage to track Xiaoyang down. As the night deepened, the trio finally arrived at their destination. By now, the city was cloaked in darkness. Stepping out of the car, they were greeted by the fortress, an imposing structure that seemed to loom over them. The old man stared in awe, his mouth agape, overwhelmed by the sheer scale and detail of the compound. Shan, standing beside him, remarked that it all felt like overkill. A fortress too grand for what they might need. Xiaoyang, calm and composed, told them to rest up. Tomorrow, he hinted cryptically, everything you know will change. The world is entering hardcore mode. The next morning, Shan woke feeling better than she had in ages. No alarms, no classes, just the rare luxury of a peaceful morning. As she stretched and looked around, she noticed Yang nearby, already up and ready for the day. Realizing that this was the perfect moment for exploration, Shan suggested a tour and Yang obliged, inviting Grandpa to join them. The fortress tour began with Yang explaining the sheer strength of the compound. The walls were made of reinforced concrete, thick and unyielding. The gates, crafted from solid steel, 3 centimeters thick, were remote-controlled and impenetrable without heavy weaponry. The design made it clear this was a fortress built for survival, ready to keep out both the living and the undead. However, Yang laid down a strict rule. No one else under any circumstances could enter the fortress without his explicit permission. This didn't sit well with Shan. She couldn't help but question the morality of leaving other survivors outside vulnerable to the undead. But Yang didn't argue. Instead, he led them to a different section of the compound, a fenced area with scattered shipping containers. This, Xiang explained, was a buffer zone. If survivors managed to find their way here, they could use this area as a temporary shelter. However, access to the main fortress remained strictly off-limits without his approval. In the chaos of the apocalypse, human nature would become unpredictable, and the risks of betrayal or exploitation were too high. Even the old man, initially skeptical, nodded in agreement as the harsh truth sank in. Next, Yang led them to the food storage facility. When they entered, they were greeted by rows upon rows of supplies stacked high and organized meticulously. It was an overwhelming sight, more provisions than they could Have imagined. Shi Yang took a moment to activate his mind's eye ability, scanning the room to check their hostility status. To his relief, both Grandpa and Sean displayed happy, trusting expressions, a clear indication that they could be relied upon. As the tour continued, Shi Yang revealed the fortress's weapons cache. He handed Sean a sleek crossbow and gave Grandpa a sturdy shotgun, emphasizing the importance of keeping these weapons secure. In this new world, losing control of their weapons could lead to chaos. Never let these fall into the wrong hands. Shi Yang warned, the seriousness in his voice, leaving no room for doubt. Shi Yang had just finished showing Sean and Grandpa around the fortress when a notification flashed before him. A new system task. It was another mission, and this one hit close to home. He was tasked with reuniting with an old comrade. Zhongqi, the name, brought back memories and a mix of emotions. But what surprised him most was the timing. Standing on the viewing deck, he noticed a glowing arrow pointing toward the city, marking Zhongqi's location. This was a fortunate coincidence. Xiaoyang had already planned to track down his former allies, and now the system seemed to reward him for his intentions. Wasting no time, he turned to Sean and Grandpa, reinforcing the fortress rules one last time. They were to stay vigilant and not break any of the guidelines no matter what. When asked where he was heading, Shi Yang simply replied, recruiting and building the team. With that, he hopped in his car and drove off, following the glowing arrow toward Zhangqi's location. The arrow led him to a KTV bar. Inside, the atmosphere was jovial, with groups of friends enjoying their night. Among them was Zhangqi, his signature silver hair shining even under the dim neon lights. He was laughing, drinking, and singing karaoke with his friends, seemingly untouched by the turmoil outside. Zhongqi and one of his friends stumbled out of the room to find a restroom, their steps unsteady and their laughter loud. After handling their business, the two drunkenly wandered back into the hallway. That's what happened. In his inebriated state, Zhangqi accidentally bumped into a girl. It was a harmless brush. Nothing serious, but the girl's irritated expression told a different story. Zhangqi quickly apologized and tried to move on. Unfortunately, the girl's escort wasn't as forgiving. The man, a towering figure with an intimidating aura, saw this as a personal affront. Without hesitation, he called Zhangqi a punk and delivered a brutal kick that sent him sprawling into the wall. Zhangqi hit the ground hard. The pain is evident in his groans. His friend, though clearly scared, didn't hesitate to check on him. But seeing Zhangqi in pain sparked something brave or perhaps reckless in a friend. Standing up, he yelled at the thug, calling out his aggression. This boldness only made things worse. The thug, unaccustomed to being challenged, became enraged. Grabbing Zhangqi's friend by the collar, he effortlessly lifted him off the ground, showcasing his brute strength. Zhangqi, despite his pain, tried to intervene. Struggling to his feet, he pleaded with the thug to let his friend go, admitting fault and apologizing profusely. Amid the chaos, a KTV staff member appeared, drawn by the noise. He wasn't in the best shape, recently recovering from stomach flu only to catch a cold. But his sense of duty prevailed. Bar fights were nothing new in his line of work, and he knew the drill. Approaching cautiously, he tried to mediate, asking both parties to calm down and de-escalate. But the thug wasn't having it. He turned his fury on the staff member, interpreting his interference as disrespect. To make matters worse, he loudly demanded that the bar's owner come out immediately, threatening to shut the place down if his demands weren't met. The staff member, though clearly nervous, gestured discreetly to Zhangqi and his friend, urging them to leave while the thug's attention was diverted. The two young men fled. Back in karaoke room 3090, Zhangqi and his friend barged in, panting and wide-eyed as if they barely escaped a predator. Their other friends turned to ask what had happened. The duo quickly explained, recounting how they had bumped into a drunken thug in the hallway, leading to threats and a near beating. They expressed gratitude for the quick-witted staffer who had stepped in to defuse the situation, even if only temporarily. One of their friends, the hot-headed Chin Chong, wasn't having it. He stood up, declaring that their mechanical engineering class had a reputation to uphold and shouldn't back down from anyone. He even suggested rallying other students from their department to teach the thugs a lesson. Zhangqi, however, stopped him in his tracks. Acting tough and seeking revenge was a foolish move. With less than a year until graduation, they didn't need trouble. They needed to keep their heads down and focus on their celebration. Reluctantly, Chun Chong sat back down, and the group decided to resume their singing and dancing, trying to salvage the night. But trouble wasn't done with him yet. Moments later, the drunk thug and his gang burst into the room. Their arrival was loud and violent, with the thug dragging the battered KTV staffer by the collar before throwing him onto the floor like a rag doll. The sight of the injured staffer silenced the room, and a chill ran through the group of college boys. The thug, his eyes scanning the room, pointed directly at Jiang Qi and his friends, grabbed them. He barked at his crew. His henchmen moved swiftly, closing in on the group. Fear paralyzed the students who didn't dare resist. They had seen what the thugs were capable of and didn't want to escalate things further. Chen Chong, however, I wasn't about to go down quietly. He taunted the gang, daring them to let him make a single phone call, implying he had backup of his own. This only enraged the thug further. Grabbing a full whiskey bottle, the thug smashed it against Chen Chong's head. The impact was brutal, sending a mix of blood and whiskey streaming down Chen Chong's face as he collapsed to the floor. Jiang Qi watched in horror, his mind racing. Outside the KTV bar, help was arriving, but he didn't know it yet. Xiaoyang had just pulled up, stepping out of his car with a calm smile. The glowing system notification had guided him here, and the sight of the lively. The bar amused him. A KTV bar was exactly the kind of place he expected college-age Jiang Qi to frequent. Inside, chaos continued. Chen Chong, despite his injuries, showed remarkable resilience. Grabbing a nearby metal ashtray, he tried to fight back. His guts impressed even the thugs, but his defiance irritated them more. The gang quickly subdued him, and the head thug delivered another savage blow with a fresh bottle. Blood splattered as Chen Chong slumped to the floor, groaning in pain. But Jiang Qi wasn't one to back down. Ignoring the armed thug surrounding them, he charged at the head thug, determined to stand up for his friend. Glasses, the ever-loyal companion, joined in to support him. Their bravery was admirable, but the odds were overwhelming. 2 college students against a gang of thugs was a recipe for disaster. The remaining friend in the group, the cowardly dude, was trembling in fear, unwilling to join the fray. Amidst the chaos, something even more terrifying began to unfold. The injured KTV staff member, lying in a heap on the floor, suddenly began to stir. His movements were jerky and unnatural, his groans becoming guttural snarls. His skin padded and his veins darkened. A horrifying transformation was taking place. In mere moments, he became a rabid zombie. With terrifying speed, he lunged at the nearest thug, sinking his teeth into the man's back like a predator attacking its prey. The bitten thug yelled in shock and pain, trying to shake the zombie off. At first, he thought it was just some deranged dog-like behavior. But the creature's bite was unrelenting, and its strength was unnatural. Another thug rushed to pull the zombie off his friend, but the creature was too strong. In a swift motion, it let go of its first victim and latched onto the second thug's arm, biting down with alarming ferocity. The room erupted into screams as panic spread among the gangsters and students alike. Meanwhile, Jiang Qi and Glasses tried to hold their ground. Even as fear gripped their classmates, the cowardly friend was now trembling uncontrollably, nearly fainting from terror. The situation looked bleak. The zombie's attacks were relentless, and its enhanced physical strength made it nearly impossible to overpower. If this continued, everyone in the room was at risk of falling victim to the infected staffer. At that moment, Yung Xiaoyong had arrived. Without hesitation, he grabbed the rabid zombie by the back of its neck and effortlessly lifted it off the ground with a single arm. The sheer strength he displayed stunned everyone in the room. Xiaoyong carried the struggling zombie to the nearest glass wall and smashed it into the pane, shattering it completely. Glass shards rained down as the zombie slumped, momentarily dazed from the impact. Shi Yang turned back to the room, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Everyone stopped. The thugs, the students, and even the terrified Jangi froze. Shioi's cold demeanor and the ease with which he had handled the raid, zombie commanded instant respect and fear. The thugs, who had struggled with the creature in pairs, realized this newcomer was no ordinary man. However, the head thug wasn't ready to back down. Misreading the situation, he directed his anger toward Xiaoyang. Still thinking he was the top dog. Ignoring the thug entirely, Xiang turned to Jiang Qi. "Were you bitten?" Jiang Qi, still reeling from the chaos, stammered, said he wasn't bitten. Without wasting time on further explanations, Xiaoyang simply ordered Jiang Qi to follow him. For some reason, Jiang Qi couldn't quite explain. He felt an unshakable compulsion to comply. However, as he moved to follow, the head thugs stepped in his way, still clinging to the delusion that he was in control. Before another fight could erupt, one of the bitten gangsters began coughing violently. His voice was, and he groaned about a splitting headache and dizziness. Shi Yang's sharp eyes scanned him, catching the unmistakable early signs of mutation. The thug exhibited every classic symptom: relentless coughing, extreme dizziness, and that ominous bite wound festering on his shoulder. Even the thug's offhand comment about having a runny nose earlier in the day confirmed Xiao Yangyang's suspicions. "Yep, he's bitten," Xiang muttered to himself, watching as the rot visibly spread from the infected wound. The proximity of the bite to the nervous system was accelerating the process. The man didn't have much time left before he turned into a full-blown zombie. They couldn't afford to deal with 2 raid zombies in such a confined space. Still holding the first rabid zombie by the neck with one hand, Shi Yang made his move. He began dragging the thrashing creature across the room, his strength leaving everyone dumbfounded. Xiaoyang hauled the zombie to the restroom door. He yanked it open, shoved the undead creature inside, and slammed the sliding door shut in one fluid motion. The rabid zombie immediately started pounding on the door, snarling and clawing with feral rage. The sound sent shivers through the room. Everyone stared at Shi Yang, their faces a mix of shock and confusion. What kind of person could casually wrangle a zombie like that? Shi Yang dusted off his hands, his expression darkening. The immediate threat was contained, but his focus now shifted back to the living threats in the room. His gaze locked onto Zhang Qi, who was still frozen in disbelief. Shi Yang then asked him, "Which one of these thugs do I need to deal with first?" Zhang Qi blinked, his brain struggling to catch up. The question confused him even more. Who was this guy? Why was he so protective of him? They didn't even know each other. Meanwhile, the head thug, his pride now in tatters, decided he'd had enough. "You're dead, punk," he roared, charging at Xiaoyang with a wild swing. Xiaoyang didn't even flinch. His expression was one of pure boredom, as if he were dealing with a pesky mosquito. Before the thug's fist could connect, Shi Yang moved like lightning, grabbing the man's face with one hand. His fingers dug into the thug's skin as he pushed forward, smashing him face first into the glass table in the center of the room. The table shattered with a deafening crash, sending shards flying everywhere. One of the other bitten gangsters, his face pale and sweaty, staggered forward in a fit of rage. Xiaoyang adjusted his stance, his movements calm and precise. In one swift motion, he delivered a sharp blow to the man's windpipe. The thug collapsed instantly, his breath choking out as he fell flat on his back. As his comrades rushed to his side, panic set in. The thug started convulsing violently, foam spilling from his mouth as his body jerked uncontrollably. His eyes rolled back, and his skin began to turn an eerie gray. The infection had reached its final stage. The man was turning right before their eyes, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Shi Yang stepped forward, flexing his fists. "Does anyone else want to test their luck?" he asked, his voice calm, yet menacing. Turning to Zhang Qi, Yahello gave a firm command. "Take your friends and get out of here now." Zhang Yi didn't hesitate. He and his classmates helped the injured Chun Chong to his feet, lending their shoulders to support him. Together, they stumbled out of the room as fast as they could, grateful to escape the nightmare. The gangsters, now desperate to retreat, tried to follow suit. They carried their wounded comrades, who were showing increasingly alarming symptoms of infection. But as they reached the door, Xiaoyang blocked their path. "You're not going anywhere," he said coldly, his presence towering over them like a storm cloud. The head thug, still nursing his injuries, tried one last act of defiance. "You think you can stop us?" he spat, his voice shaky yet defiant. The gangsters cowered under his gaze, their drunken bravado long gone. For the first time in their lives, they realized they weren't the top dogs they thought they were. Xiaoyang didn't bother responding. He shoved the thug back effortlessly, sending him sprawling to the ground once again, and the closing door shut. The gangster's bruised ego couldn't take it. He scrambled up and started pounding on the door as Xiaoyang stepped outside, slamming it shut behind him. The head thug screamed, banging on the locked door in a blind rage, but his tirade was cut short by a guttural growl behind him. One of his bitten men had succumbed to the infection. The thug turned just in time to see the bloodshot, crimson eyes of his now rayed friend lunging at him with terrifying speed. The room erupted into chaos as the other gangsters tried to fight off their former friend, but it was too late. The infection spread quickly, and soon the room devolved into carnage. Outside, Xiaoyang stood silently, holding the door handle firmly to keep anyone from escaping. Muffled screams and the sound of tearing flesh echoed from the other side, sending chills down the spine of anyone who could hear. A hesitant KTV employee approached him, curiosity mixed with fear, asking what's going on in there. Xiang didn't waste time. "Get the keys and lock this door now. Don't let anyone in or out. Call the police and paramedics. Tell them it's a rabies flu outbreak." The employees stared at him, frozen in shock, but Shi Yang told him to move. Now, the urgency snapped the worker out of his daze. He ran to grab the keys, returning to lock the doors securely from the outside. The eerie, inhuman noises coming from the room made the employees shiver. One of them, too, curious for their own good, hurried to the security room to check the live footage inside the room. What they saw made their blood run cold. The screen showed a grotesque scene of rabid figures feasting on their dead comrades. Blood splattered the walls, and the head thug's girlfriend, previously full of life, was now being torn apart by the monsters. Her lifeless eyes stared blankly as the infected devoured her. The security team immediately called the authorities, their hands trembling as they reported the horrors unfolding in their establishment. Meanwhile, Shi Yang led Zhang Qi and his friends out of the building. "This area isn't safe anymore," Shi Yang said, his tone firm. "You need to leave now." Still shaken, the college boys didn't argue. They followed him to his car, helping the injured Chun Chung inside. As Xiaoyang drove them away, Zhang Qi finally broke the silence. "Thanks for helping us back there," he said hesitantly. "But who are you? Why did you step in?" Shirao Yang glanced at him, said, "I was hired to protect you by someone who wants to stay anonymous." The explanation made sense. At least enough for the moment. The coward boy nervously asked, "That rabbit flew. It's real, isn't it? I thought it was just a hoax." Xiao Yang's expression darkened. "What do you think you saw back there? Those weren't drunken fights or wild animals. It's real, and it's just the beginning." Glasses gulped, his voice trembling. "Is there any cure, a vaccine?" "No," Shi Yang said bluntly. "There's no cure, no medicine, and no way to stop it. It's already started, and it's only going to get worse. If you want to survive, you'll listen to everything I say from now on." As they drove through the streets, Shi Yang's point was further proven when they saw an infected man chasing a terrified pedestrian on the side of the road. The chaos hadn't completely consumed the city yet, but the outbreak was spreading rapidly. Soon, there would be no safe place left. Looking at the back seat, Xiao Yang's mind wandered to a darker memory. In their past life, one of Zhang Qi's friends had betrayed him, leading to the deaths of countless people at the hands of zombies. Zhang Qi was the only one who barely survived, but the betrayal scarred him deeply. Shi Yang's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, scanning the faces of the college boys sitting behind him. One of them had been the traitor. The question was, which one? On the other side of town, Kajing was on a phone call with the man she affectionately called Honey. She had been feeling unusually anxious lately. The witch was promised some much-needed supplies, but things in her neighborhood had started to spiral out of control. Too scared to step out herself, she relied on his assurances that he'd deliver the goods as soon as he could. Just as she was about to press him for details, a sudden knock at the door startled her, nearly causing her heart to leap out of her chest. She hung up immediately, her breath shaky as she cautiously approached the door. Peeking through the peephole, she exhaled in relief. It was her friend Xia. Kajing quickly unlocked the door to let her in. Even as they exchanged greetings, a lingering unease hung in the air. Earlier that day, an elderly man named Liu, who lived on the building's first floor, had been taken away by both the police and an ambulance. Though the incident was hushed up, Kajing had heard the commotion from her apartment that morning. The two witches began to piece together what was happening around them. It was hard to dismiss the growing evidence that the rabies flu news wasn't just media fear-mongering. As for Luk Chang's promised delivery of supplies, it was still nowhere to be seen. Xiao Yao had warned Ka Jing that greasy fatty couldn't be trusted, but they both knew he had his uses. If nothing else, he could be their pawn in a plan they just cooked up. Her idea was simple: ransack Zhang Xiaoyang's secret stockpile. The stockpile they'd learned was massive, enough to make anyone rich in the middle of this escalating epidemic. Xiaoyang had already tried and failed to seduce Xiaoyang, getting herself kicked out in the process. Not wanting to give up, she had one of her devoted followers spy on him. That's how she discovered trucks regularly unloading supplies at an abandoned factory he'd refurbished. Clearly, Xiaoyang had known about the epidemic long before the news broke. The two witches decided it was time to act. They planned to use Lai Shuqiang to get into Shaoli's fortress and take a share of his hoarded riches by force. Meanwhile, Xiaoyang had just returned to his base camp without any trouble. As his car rolled into the compound, it was hard not to be impressed by what he had built in such a short time. Zhang Yi was visibly amazed. Fortress seemed a more fitting term than base camp. Xiaoyang smiled at Zhang Qi's reaction. It was the same awe everyone felt the first time they saw it. The sound of their arrival stirred the camp's residents, who emerged with weapons at the ready. Once they recognized Shi Yang, relief washed over their faces. Grandpa Shan and his granddaughter Shan Shan were particularly glad to see him return safely. Xiaoyang reassured them he was fine and introduced his companions. He knew Zhang Qi well, but simply referred to the others as Zhang Qi's classmates. Grandpa Shan and Shan Shan welcomed the newcomers warmly, assuring them they were now in a safe place. Xiaoyang quickly assigned Grandpa Sha to take the group on a tour of the fortress, explaining the rules and regulations. Glasses, one of the newcomers, couldn't help but feel like they'd walked into a military base. Before they could even start the tour, Yiming, another new arrival, timidly spoke up. He asked if they could be given weapons to help defend the fortress. Xiaoyang shot him a sharp look, suspicion flickering in his eyes. They had barely been there an hour, and this guy was already asking to be armed. That was suspicious. Glasses whispered to Yiming, urging him to tone down his eagerness. They were newcomers, after all. Trust had to be earned first. To calm the situation, Xiaoyang promised that weapons would be issued to everyone in a few days. For now, their priority was to get Chun Chang's head injury treated. His condition was severe, so the medical room was their next stop. After a few hours, the boys finally managed to shake off the tension and the lingering smell of booze after their life or death ordeal. In turn 2, Glasses with a grumble. "Why'd you stop me earlier?" he asked. "If you hadn't, we'd probably have guns by now." Ying's little speech about needing protection in their current situation. It would have been funny if it weren't so irritating. Without weapons, he compared staying in the fortress to being under house arrest. Thankfully, Glasses had enough sense to be grateful for being saved from the infected instead of stirring up unnecessary trouble. But Yiming wasn't done. He kept sowing seeds of distrust among his classmates, questioning Xiang's story. Hired by an anonymous client for protection, Yiming scoffed. That doesn't even make sense. He gritted his teeth and brought up Chen Chang's treatment, too. While Xiaoyang had promised to monitor Chen's condition, Yiming found the medical room's high security suspicious. That's when Yiming dropped his most ridiculous theory yet. He claimed Xiaoyang might be planning to harvest Chen's organs in secret. It was absurd, but Yiming seemed determined to recruit others to his cause. His plan: strike first against their so-called savior. Glasses immediately shot down the idea. Betraying Xiaoyang, the man who had saved their lives, was out of the question. But Yiming wasn't backing down. "I'd rather betray the world than let the world betray me," he said, trying to sound dramatic. His ultimate goal was to take over the fortress and claim control of the area. Yiming even had the gall to suggest capturing Grandpa and the girl if Xiaoyang ever left. He didn't stop there. He made a disgusting comment about Shan being cute and hinted at his twisted intentions. The boys stared at him with utter disgust, realizing his plan was going nowhere. Yiming waved it off with a laugh. "Relax, I was just joking," he said. Zhang Qi, naive as ever, took the excuse at face value. Glasses pointed out the obvious. If Xiaoyang really wanted to harvest their organs, they'd already be locked up and helpless by now. As the group left the showers, Yiming silently wrote them off as not worthy of his grand plans. He was convinced that in times of chaos, only the ruthless survive. While Yiming brooded over his rejected schemes, Grandpa Shan gave Xiaoyang an update. Zhang Qi and the others had started settling in, and Chun Chang was on the observation. As instructed, all doors and windows had been secured. Xiaoyang thanked Grandpa Shan and Shan for their hard work, urging them to rest up. Before they left, Xiaoyang gave them a quiet warning. "Keep an eye on Zhang's classmates," he said. "I'm sensing some traitorous vibes." In the dead of night, Xiaoyang headed straight to his warehouse to take care of some business. He opened the system's item shop and carefully inspected the offerings. With a few clicks, he redeemed the Level 1 Apocalypse Farmer Box for 2 points, the Level 1 Food Supply Box for 5 points, and the Level 1 Armed Deterrent Supply Box for another 5 points. This left him with 8 points remaining. The rewards were as practical as they were impressive. The Apocalypse Farmer Box provided 50 corn seeds, ensuring a potential food source for the long term. The Food Supply Box delivered an impressive haul. 200 kilograms of starch sausage, 100 kilograms of pre-cooked braised pork with preserved vegetables, and 50 boxes of pickled cabbage noodles. Meanwhile, the Armed Deterrent Box contained 1,500 rounds of 9 million ammunition, a crucial asset for defense. Xiang piled the rewards together and couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment at the sheer size of the haul. In an apocalypse where resources would soon become scarce, supplies like these were priceless. It wasn't the same as having money to spend freely, but in this grim reality, this was worth far more than cash. The next morning, the tranquility of the fortress was shattered by the arrival of multiple vehicles pulling up to the gate. Armed men carrying blades poured out of the cars, their movements brisk and purposeful. A man in a suit, clearly in charge, ended his phone call and barked orders at his crew. "Break down the gate," he yelled. The group, nicknamed the Stupid Army, for good reason, began bashing the steel gates with bats and kicking them with all their might. After several minutes of futile effort, the men complained loudly about the gate's thickness. Furious, Mr. Suit ordered his men to bring out their big guns. However, instead of explosives or heavy weaponry, the crates they carried contained something much less impressive: wine bottles. The gang quickly turned these into Molotov cocktails, lighting them up and hurling them over the gates. The fiery bottles landed clumsily, mostly setting small fires in the yard rather than hitting any valuable targets. Even so, the bright flames caused quite a stir. A few managed to land on the roof of the outer apartment complex, drawing attention from those inside. Shan, Zhang Qi, and the others sprang into action, grabbing fire extinguishers and buckets of water to contain the blaze. Thankfully, Xiaoyang had already warned them about the likelihood of attacks like this. Though the larger disaster hadn't yet unfolded, situations like these were becoming all too common. While the younger group dealt with the fires, Shirao Yang and Grandpa Shan emerged from the warehouse. Armed with an assault rifle and a shotgun, respectively, they climbed up to the watchtower for a better view of the chaos outside. Once at the top, Grandpa Shan peered at the scene below and squinted in recognition. That guy in the suit, doesn't he look familiar? Pretty sure he's the one who had that road rage incident with us on the highway a few days ago. One of the thugs on the ground spotted the two figures standing on a watchtower and pointed them out to Mr. Suit. "Boss, there he is. That's the guy from the road." Mr. Suit's anger exploded. Recognizing Xiaoyang, he screamed obscenities. His voice carried loud and clear to the watchtower. "You little punk, you got some nerve. Get your ass down here or I'll burn this place to the ground." Hai Yang, calm and composed, replied coldly. "You've got 5 minutes to get off my property. If you're still here after that, you won't like what happens next." The gangsters were enraged. To them, Shia's warning was nothing more than a brat's empty threat. Instead of backing down, they doubled down on their efforts, hauling out 2 more crates of Molotov cocktails to negotiate their way in. Suddenly, Xiaoyang's system sent him a new task. While Grandpa Shan was stressing over whether they should fire a warning shot, Xiaoyang was busy reading the mission details. The task was straightforward. Eliminate the threats as quickly as possible for a reward of 10 points. The generous reward quickly dispelled any notion of firing warning shots. These intruders were no innocent bystanders. They were criminal gangsters causing chaos even before society had fully broken down. Their reckless use of Molotov cocktails could have easily burned someone alive. Xiaoyang believed that leaving scum like this alive during the apocalypse would only lead to more harm for innocent people. With that thought in mind, he made his decision. Without warming, he steadied his aim and pulled the trigger. The first bullet tore into Mr. Suit's arm, stunning him into silence and causing him to clutch his now severed limb. The man's agonized screams filled the air, and the thugs quickly realized they had picked the wrong fight. From the watchtower, Xiaoyang remained calm on the outside, though he silently cursed himself for missing the kill shot. His aim had grown rusty after living a peaceful life for so long. The thugs, panicked by the sight of the assault rifle, scattered and dove for cover behind their vehicles. Leading the retreat was none other than their injured boss, Mr. Suit. But Xiaoyang wasn't one to let his targets escape. With a grim determination, he began picking off the retreating thugs one by one. They had rained fire on his property, so he returned the favor with lead, aiming for their chests, heads, and anything else in his line of sight. It was a brutal slaughter. Mr. Suit, driven by pure adrenaline, managed to reach one of the vehicles and scramble inside, ignoring the bleeding stump that used to be his arm. He screamed at the driver to get them out of there immediately. Grandpa Shan, watching from the tower, cast a worried glance at the escaping car, but Xiaoyang showed no concern. This was why he had grabbed the automatic rifle from the armory. Taking careful aim, he tracked the vehicle's movements and unleashed a relentless barrage of high-caliber bullets. Magazine after magazine, Xiaoyang emptied his load, each shot finding its mark. Grandpa Shan observed in awe. The young man's fluid movements, aiming, firing, reloading, were a sight to behold. Even during his years of military service, Grandpa Shan had never seen such precision and efficiency. When Xiaoyang was finally done, silence returned to the area around the fortress. The fire set by the Molotov cocktails had been extinguished, and the road leading to the gate was littered with the bodies of thugs. The getaway vehicle, riddled with bullets, had broken down entirely. Everyone inside was lifeless. Their escape attempt was cut short. Without missing a beat, Xiaoyang turned to Grandpa Shan. "Call Zhang Qi and the others," he said. "Have them come out and clean up the mess at the front door." But as he watched the scene below, a new idea formed in his mind. It was still the early days of the apocalypse, and this incident could be used to their advantage. Instead of disposing of the bodies, he could allow them to mutate into zombies. This would create practical combat scenarios to help Zhang Yi and Shan develop their fighting skills. With a faint smirk, Xiaoyang revised his instructions. "Leave them where they are. We'll use this for something more productive later." Not far from the fortress, another group of cars and vans approached, closing in steadily. Inside, one of the white cars, Lai Shuzhang, impatiently asked if they were close to the site. Xiaoyang, seated beside him, answered with her usual cutesy and playful tone, cheerfully assuring him they'd arrive after the next intersection. In the back seat, Kajing was growing increasingly irritated by Xiaoya's act. To her, it was obvious that Xia Yao was putting on this performance to keep Lu Kong, her gangster sugar daddy, entertained. Kajing, being no stranger to manipulation, could easily see through another schemer's moves. When they finally pulled up to the outskirts of the fortress, Kajing turned to Lai Zong and told him to wait while she and Xiao went ahead to investigate. The moment Kajing stepped out of the car, she tried to drag Xiaoya into her scheme, insisting that Xiaoya was the only one who knew the exact location of Xiaoyang's supposed factory. Xiaoya, however, didn't want to get involved, pointing out the obvious. She claimed it was the building directly ahead, adding that it was impossible to miss. She also complained that her shoes weren't suitable for walking long distances. But Kajing wasn't taking no for an answer, ignoring Xiaoya's protests. Even her request to grab her phone. Kajing physically dragged her out of the car. Reluctantly, Xiaoya followed, though she silently fumed at being forced into this mess. Back in the car, Lu Kong called his crew to action. Get ready to move at a moment's notice, he ordered. He planned to lead the charge with the vans packed full of young thugs and veteran gangsters following close behind. As they walked toward the fortress, Xiaoya whispered her frustrations to Kajing, making it clear she didn't want to be dragged into whatever chaos was about to unfold. But Kajing, ever suspicious, saw through Xiaoya's reluctance. She assumed Xiaoya was making a play for her gangster sugar daddy. The truth was far more calculating. Xiaoya had no interest in Luxong. She had dressed up and played her part in hopes of catching the attention of Xiaoyang. After all, Kajing's involvement with Fatty had already compromised her in Xiaoyang's eyes. As they approached the gate, the women finally noticed the grisly scene ahead. The road leading to the fortress was littered with corpses riddled with bullet wounds. Xiaoya froze in fear, urging Kajing to turn back. Judging by the dried blood, it was clear the bodies had been there for some time. Kajing, however, was undeterred. She guessed that the bodies belonged to two rival groups who had fought over Xiaoyang's supplies. With hardened criminals lying dead in the aftermath, she assumed that Xiaoyang, the supposed loser, must have been caught in the crossfire. But even if he hadn't survived, the supplies were all that mattered. Xiaoya tried to reason with her, suggesting they let Lai Shu Kong and his boys handle the situation. But Kajing insisted on sneaking closer to check if the factory gates were locked. What the women didn't know was that the gangster corpses had already begun mutating the virus in their systems, activating postmortem. Oblivious to the danger, the two women pressed on toward the gates. Standing in front of the massive steel barrier, Xiaoya pointed out that there was no visible way to open it. The gates were sealed tight, and even the interior compound was obscured from view. That at least gave her some relief, as it suggested Xiaoyang might still be safe and secure. Their scheming was interrupted when a voice called out from the outpost near the entrance. Shan Shan, armed with a crossbow, stood guard. Putting on a tough front, she demanded to know who they were and how they'd found the fortress. Xia quickly adopted a friendly tone, pretending to be an old acquaintance. She told Shan Shan that the two of them were friends of Xiaoyang. Kajing, always bold, went a step further, claiming to be Xia's girlfriend. Shan Shan, unimpressed, turned back toward the compound to inform Xiaoyang of the two witches outside, one of whom was making wild claims about being his girlfriend. As soon as Shan Shan was out of earshot, Kajing began venting her frustration. She accused Shirao Yangyang of ditching her for a younger woman, clearly referring to Shan Shan. Xiaoya, more pragmatic, warned Kajing to keep her emotions in check. Shan Shan had a crossbow and wasn't afraid to use it. The women's confidence, however, lay in their belief that Lu Qigang and his armed gang could pull off the heist. As far as they were concerned, all they needed to do was open the gates and let the chaos unfold. When Xiaoyang arrived at the watchtower and laid eyes on the two women, two of the most troublesome figures from his past, his anger was barely contained. Secretly activating his mind's eye, he appraised their status. Sure enough, their outward friendliness was nothing but a facade. Both women were seething with hidden negative emotions, each trying to manipulate the situation to their advantage. Shirao Yao wasted no time putting on her performance, claiming they had come to check on Xiaoyang out of concern. She painted a picture of chaos and worry, trying to appeal to his pity. But Xiaoyang, having learned his lesson from past experiences, wasn't falling for it. With a cold smirk, he called their bluff. So he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "What kind of weapons did you bring with you this time?" The scheming duo, Kajing and Xiaoya, stood frozen in place. Their plans had been completely unraveled before they even stepped into the fortress. To make matters worse, Xiaoyang decided to teach them a lesson right then and there. From the watchtower, he opened fire, raining bullets onto the spot where they stood. Panicked, the two women screamed and danced around, dodging the shots. They shouted at him, calling him crazy for being so reckless. But Xiaoyang, standing tall and calm, emptied his magazine without hesitation. Shirao Yao was terrified of the firearm and tried to appeal for a calmer, less hostile resolution. Kajing, however, doubled down, treating Xiaoyang as the weak, spineless fool she always thought he was. They couldn't have been more wrong. Killing them outright would have been too easy for Shirao Yang. Instead, he had something far darker and more gruesome in mind, a punishment that would match the malice in their hearts. That's when the groans started. From behind the women, the corpses of the gangster thugs began to stir. One by one, reanimated, their bodies twisted and ravenous. Xia Yang watched the scene from his perch, completely unfazed. The transformation of the gangsters into zombies weren't just a terrifying spectacle. It was poetic justice. Leading the pack of the undead was none other than the cowardly Mr. Suit, still clinging to his twisted sense of importance, even in death. The first 3 zombies lunged with terrifying speed, desperate to sink their teeth into fresh flesh. The women screamed and started running, barely avoiding the snapping jaws and clawing hands of the undead. Frantic and breathless, they screamed for help. Their cries reached the ears of Lai Shukong, still sitting in his car nearby. He glanced out the window and saw the horrifying sight of zombies chasing the women. Fear gripped him immediately. Without hesitation, Liu Kong barked orders at his men. "Turn around. Get us out of here." His gang obeyed instantly, their vehicles screeching as they sped away, leaving the women behind to fend for themselves. Kajing, panicked and desperate, was slowing down. She wasn't fast, and the zombies were closing in, but she wasn't about to go down without trying. Something underhanded. With no hesitation, she threw her purse forward, aiming for Xiaoya, the faster runner. The purse's strap caught around Xiaoya's ankle, tripping her. Xiaoya fell face first onto the pavement, injuring herself badly. She barely had time to recover before the zombies pounced on her. Their teeth tore into her flesh as she screamed in agony. Blood splattered everywhere as they devoured her, their hunger insatiable. Xiaoya's cries turned into gurgles of rage and betrayal. In her final moments, her bloodshot eyes locked onto Kajing, who had deliberately sacrificed her. But Kajing didn't stop to look back. Instead, she kept running, muttering to herself that Xiaoya deserved it. Her callousness knew no bounds. From the watchtower, Xiaoyang observed the entire scene, his expression cold and detached. As Shurao met her grisly end, the system in his mind chimed, awarding him 10 more points for eliminating a threat. Meanwhile, Shan, standing nearby, was horrified. She had never seen zombies before, and the sight of the dead gangsters reanimating into flesh-hungry monsters was almost too much for her to handle. Xiaoyang, still calm, explained the situation to her. "This is the true beginning," he said. "The air is filled with infectious alien particles now. Anyone exposed to the outdoors for too long, especially the dead or weak, will mutate quickly." He wasn't interested in watching the chaos unfold any longer. Turning his focus inward, he decided it was time to regroup and prepare for what was coming. Summoning everyone in the fortress, Xiaoyang called an urgent meeting. Once everyone was gathered, he laid out his plan. For the next 2 days, they needed to stay indoors. Windows and doors were to be sealed. No one was to go outside for any reason. This would give their bodies time to gradually adapt to the infection, reducing the risk of mutation. Hearing this, Jiang Qi brought up a critical concern. What about Chen Chong? He was still unconscious in the urgent care room. The mention of Chen Chong shifted the mood. While his head wound had improved thanks to basic medical care, he still hadn't regained consciousness. Worse, his condition was deteriorating. It was clear that the infection was spreading rapidly through his body. Even though his subconscious fought back against the mutation, the virus was relentless. His veins bulged visibly, the infection coursing through him like wildfire. Meanwhile, the city had descended into utter chaos. Violence and pandemonium filled the streets. Some people were trying to escape. Some were losing control, and others were eating each other. Zhang Shanzi, hiding in his home and peeking through the window, muttered to himself, "It's complete madness out there." He had a plan. As soon as night fell, he would head to a warehouse to gather supplies for his family. Until then, he warned his wife and child to never open the door for anyone except him. But just then, someone started banging on the door. The loud successive knocks sent a wave of tension through the room. The family froze, wondering what or who could be on the other side. Shanzi gestured to his wife and child to stay silent. Grabbing a golf club from his kid, he cautiously approached the door to check the situation. A voice called out, "Brothers." Hearing this, the old man sighed in relief. It was his old buddy, Yang Tao, or so he thought. Zay began to pull the handle to let his friend in. But before he could, the visitors forced their way in with a powerful kick that sent Zay flying across the room. His frail body hit the wall with a thud. What he believed to be a friend was far worse, far more dangerous than even the zombies outside. A gang of furious thugs surrounded him, their anger palpable. As his former colleagues loomed over him, he desperately tried to meet Yong Tao's eyes. Hoping to appeal to whatever goodwill might be left, he reminded Yong Tao of how well he had been treated in the organization. But Yong Tao wasn't buying it. To him, Zay had always been an arrogant boss who saw Yong Tao as nothing more than a disposable lackey. Sure, Yong Tao had made decent money, enough to put a down payment on a house, but Zay earned enough to buy entire neighborhoods. But this wasn't about the past. It was about business. The thugs weren't here to chat. They wanted the warehouse keys and an address. Zay's defiance was starting to test their patience. Seeing his stubbornness, Yong Tao made his way towards Zay's wife and child. Without hesitation, he grabbed the wife by her hair, forcing Zay to watch in horror. The little boy, driven by pure instinct, charged at Yong Tao to protect his mother. But the size difference was too great. All the child could do was sink his teeth into the thug's arm, his face soaked with tears of fear. It didn't work. Yong Tao retaliated with a sharp slap that sent the boy reeling. Watching his family suffer, Zay's anger boiled over. He shouted at Yong Tao, demanding he come after him instead. Yong Tao, however, remained calm. He promised no further harm would come to the mother and child if Zay cooperated and led them to the warehouse. Left with no choice, Zay complied, and the group set off, dragging him along as their hostage. They soon arrived at the warehouse. The mechanical door creaked open, revealing only a few scattered supply boxes. A far cry from the treasure trove the thugs had expected. It turned out that most of the stock had already been sold, even the nearly expired food, to a big client. Hearing the name Zhang Xiaoyang, their wealthy buyer, sparked a new idea in Yong Tao's mind. Why stop here? They could raid Zhang Xiao's factory and claim his massive stockpile of supplies for themselves. If they succeeded, they'd be set for life. Brother Zay strongly advised against such a reckless plan. During his routine deliveries, he had accidentally spotted a young man carrying a gun. This led him to suspect that Xiaoyang had somehow learned about the looming disaster beforehand. Yong Tao, however, remained calm and unbothered by the mention of guns. To him, it was a matter for Brother Z to handle, not his concern. The thug's explanation was simple yet chilling. His job was to take Zhang Xiaoyu's supplies in exchange for ensuring the safety of his wife and son. Yong Tao called it a fair trade, but Brother Zay was trapped in a terrible dilemma, torn between saving his family and his moral compass. Unsure how to navigate the crisis. Back in Xiaoyang's seemingly impenetrable fortress, the situation was tense yet quieter. Following repeated failed invasion attempts, the group had assembled in the urgent care area to confront a grim reality. Their biggest problem now lay in the bed before them. Chun Chong, who had succumbed to the infection. After losing consciousness for several days, he had finally woken up, but his mind was gone. His body was alive, but his humanity had been lost. His classmates were devastated. Tears flowed as they mourned their brave and kind friend. Almost everyone was crying. Everyone except Yiming. Unlike the others, Yiming boldly declared that they should kill Chun Chong immediately. His suggestion shocked the group. Xiaoyang turned to look at the defiant young man, while Zhang Yi glared at him with disgust and disappointment. How could you suggest something so cruel? But Yiming stood firm. He argued that Chun Chong was already gone. If they didn't put an end to his suffering now, and he somehow broke free, everyone's lives would be at risk. Xiaoyang, known for his pragmatism, agreed with Yiming's cold logic. The chances of recovery were nearly zero. Slowly, he drew his combat knife and unsheathed the blade. But instead of handling the matter himself, Xiaoyang handed the knife to Yiming. You want him gone? Then you do it, Xiaoyang said calmly. Yiming froze, fear spreading across his face. Every fiber of his being resisted the idea of carrying out the execution. Xiaoyang, unimpressed, reminded him of how he had been asking for a weapon since the beginning. Here's your weapon, Xiaoyang said, pushing the knife closer. Use it. But Yiming couldn't bring himself to move. His hands trembled, his courage failing him completely. After a tense moment, Zhang Qi stepped forward. Swallowing his fear, he took the knife from Xiaoyu's hand. I'll do it, Zhang Qi said with determination. He wasn't proud of the decision, but he knew it had to be done. If Yiming was too much of a coward to act, then he would. As he gripped the knife, Zhang Yi hesitated. His mind wrestled with the reality of the situation. Could he really go through with it? Xiaoyang, observing his hesitation, asked calmly. Are you sure? Once you do this, there's no going back. If you're wrong, it makes you a murderer. Zhang Yi clenched his jaw. I trust you, he said to Xiaoyang, his voice firm despite the turmoil in his heart. Xiaoyang smiled faintly, almost as if he had expected this response. He gave Zhang Qi the green light. Zhang Qi approached Chun Chong's bedside, tears streaming down his face. He raised the knife high, aiming for his friend's throat. His hands shook as he prepared to strike, but just as the blade was about to pierce the flesh, Xiaoyang intervened. The knife stopped midair. Zhang Qi, startled and confused, turned to Xiaoyang, desperate for an answer. Why did you stop me? He asked with a shaky voice. The answer was straightforward. The system had given Xiaoyang an intriguing evaluation. For now, he instructed everyone to leave. They had something extraordinary in their possession, a zombie that still held value. Chun Chong had transformed into a rare mutated variant, a discovery of immense significance. The group left the urgent care unit and went about their tasks within the fortress, leaving only Xiaoyang and the mutated zombie behind. Chun Chong, now a grotesque creature, thrashed violently, desperate to sink his teeth into Xiaoli's flesh. His bulging veins, dark and foreboding, were enough to haunt anyone's dreams. But not Shirao Yang. Standing face to face with the aggressive mutant, Shirao Yang remained calm, even exhilarated. With a hint of excitement in his voice, he told the creature it had an important mission to fulfill. Outside, near the fortress on the town's outskirts, a car was swerving uncontrollably, struggling to stay on course. With no other vehicles on the road, the poorly driven car eventually crashed into a lamppost, rendering it useless. Brother Z stepped out, scratching his head in frustration. His bad luck had cost him a car before reaching his destination. Fortunately, the factory wasn't far, just a short walk away, so he was almost there. However, his calm demeanor quickly shifted to fear when a gang of zombie stragglers attacked. Drawn by the noise, Brother Z foolishly shielded himself with his arm, allowing the zombie to bite deep into his flesh. He pushed the mindless monster away, his left arm bleeding. As the zombie staggered to its feet, Brother Z ran back to the wrecked car, desperate to find a crowbar he had prepared as a weapon. It might help, but would it be enough? His anger and adrenaline fueled his strength as he swung the crowbar, striking the zombie across the face with a brutal hit. After knocking the eager zombie down, he continued bashing its skull until it stopped moving completely. Dealing with one of these creatures had drained him, and standing exposed while more zombies approached was not a good strategy. He couldn't afford to stay there, so Brother Z made his way toward the factory, his body shaking uncontrollably. He feared it was the virus spreading inside him from a bite. At the front gate of the fortress, a cluster of stationary zombies awaited their next prey, conserving energy. To avoid the trouble, Xiaoyang quietly opened the side door for the team's mission. Behind him, the rest of the crew, armed with their chosen weapons, followed. Most carried melee weapons, and Shan complained that all the gear strapped to their bodies made movement awkward. Xiaoyang explained that zombies were irrational but powerful, and with their current combat experience, they were likely to get hurt, so the protective gear was necessary. He promised they could remove it once they were more skilled. The team crept along the building, sticking close to the walls to avoid being noticed immediately. As they reached the front, Xiaoyang spotted the first zombie in their path and signaled the team to prepare. Entering the zombie's detection range, it turned toward them, revealing its decaying teeth. With the battle imminent, Xiaoyang reminded his team to remember their training. Always watch each other's backs and maintain a safe distance. As the zombie charged, Xiaoyang demonstrated his impressive evasion technique, dodging its attack effortlessly. He remained calm enough to provide a lesson in the middle of the fight. When a zombie misses its attack, he explained, survivors must take advantage of the moment. Be quick and aim for the temple or the back of the neck. Glasses, however, was the first to act on instinct, ignoring Xiaoyang's advice about targeting the right spots. As he raised his blade, his attack struck with precision. The machete's edge lodged between the zombie's partially split skull. It might have stunned the creature, but hitting the head directly caused the blade to vibrate, sending a sharp pain through his hand. The skull is the hardest part of the head, and using a melee weapon on it only makes the hands go numb, as Glasses had experienced. After a brief stun, the zombie snapped back with renewed aggression, desperately trying to bite into the student's flesh. Thankfully, Glasses had the presence of mind to use his blade defensively, trapping the zombie teeth on its edge while calling out for help. Xiaoyang commended him for his excellent defense and instructed Zhang Qi to snap out of it and assist his teammate. Young Qi, with a calm and determined expression, moved behind the zombie, positioning his bat at the back of its neck. When his wooden bat hit the neck, a sharp cracking sound followed. Xiaoyang was pleased with their first real training results and reminded them that one strike wouldn't be enough. So, everyone joined in to finish off the zombie. Once it was down, Zhang Qi eagerly turned to Xiaoyang, seeking validation for their successful hit. Xiaoyang only smirked as another aggressive zombie appeared, snarling and charging, hungry for human flesh. Zhang Yi's face turned worried, fearing Xiaoyang might be sneak attacked by the mindless corpse. But instead of a bite, the group watched as Xiaoyang turned around, grabbing the zombie by the head like a toy. He pushed its mouth away from his body while the zombie struggled helplessly. Xiaoyang reminded everyone to follow his example, always observing their surroundings and never letting their guard down. Zhang Qi took this lesson to heart, while the others were simply amazed by Xiaoyang's proficiency with just his bare hands. Meanwhile, Brother Z, still fighting through his bite wound, inched closer to the factory gate. From his hiding spot, he could see more mutants wandering the area. He began to wonder if Zhang Xiaoyang had already met his end when he suddenly heard voices near the outer wall. He recognized Xiaoyang's face and moved closer for a better look. Using a van as cover, he peered through and saw Shirao Yang with a group of strangers hunting mutants, crushing their skulls with every blow. However, the desperate gangster failed to notice something lurking beneath the van. It was none other than Xiaoya, or what was left of her. Despite the zombie infection, her heavy makeup hadn't changed her face much. She reached up, grabbing Brother Zay's foot and refusing to let go. Her sudden grip made him stumble, and when he looked down, his eyes widened in terror. Xiaoya's torn mouth opened to emit a guttural roar, her clothes in tatters. It seemed like this might be the end for Brother Z. Before he even had a chance to fight back, as he braced for death, a gunshot rang out. Someone had taken pity on him and saved him. It was none other than our hero, Shirao Yang. Now, the zombie Shirao Yao was headless, and not just in a metaphorical sense. Her head was physically gone. Brother Zay was left disgusted, throwing the corpse away from him. When Xiaoyang saw Zay, he was surprised to find him there and immediately asked what he was doing in this chaotic situation. Zay, like all of his previous fake friends, didn't rush to explain himself. Instead, he pretended to be pleased to see Xiang alive, even with the madness all around them. But as he got closer, Shirao Yang noticed a bite mark on Zay's arm. In the heat of the moment, Zay didn't realize it, but Xiao Yang pointed it out clearly with the barrel of his automatic rifle, warning him not to come any closer. At that moment, Zay realized his fate was sealed. He wasn't giving up, though. He had one last chance to save his family. Zay begged Xiang not to shoot him yet and asked for a favor. Xiaoyang agreed to listen, but only on the condition that Zay stayed where he was. This was Zay's last effort to save his family. He was already infected, and soon he would become one of those crazy zombies. But he still had one final request. Yang Tao had kidnapped his wife and son and was using them to blackmail Z, forcing him to infiltrate Xiaoyang's base and seize all of its resources. Zay admitted that he wasn't a good person, but even he had never done anything as evil as what Yang Tao was doing to his innocent family. He feared for their lives, knowing that if they were left in Tao's hands, their fate would be worse than his own once he turned into a zombie. So Zay pleaded with Shirao Yang to take care of his family. Even though he knew he had only helped him before for his own benefit, Xiaoyang was aware of Zay's greed. But he had to admit that Zay had saved him time in the past. He pondered the right thing to do. The fortress had enough space, and the number of men far outweighed the women. Breaking that balance wouldn't be an issue. Luckily, he didn't have to think long. A notification from the system arrived, offering a new mission called Entrust the Wife and Child. To complete it, Xiaoyang would have to rescue Zay's family, and he would gain more points for this task than for clearing out zombies near the fortress. Without hesitation, Xiaoyang agreed to take care of Zay's family. Zay, overwhelmed with gratitude, couldn't believe Xiang's kindness. He even bowed, saying that he could never repay him in this life, but would serve him faithfully in the next life. But Zay had one final request. Shirao Yang pretended not to understand, but it was clear Zay didn't want to turn into one of those monstrous zombies and put his family at risk. He asked Shirao Yang to end his life now. Xiaoyang, however, wasn't in a hurry to act. Unlike Zay, he understood how the apocalyptic world worked. Instead, he told Shashan to bring a bicycle from the warehouse for Zay. He advised him to go as far from people as possible to a completely isolated place. Zay didn't understand why Xiang was doing this, but he didn't question it. He didn't have much time left and had no choice but to follow Xiaoyang's instructions. Driven by thoughts of his wife and son, Zay took off on the bicycle, determined to escape the inevitable zombie transformation that was already spreading through his body. Meanwhile, Xiaoyang and his team finished clearing out the zombies near the fortress. They piled them up, drenched them with fuel, and set them on fire. It was a tough day, and they were exhausted. But at least now the zombies would never rise again. Xiaoyang's team was now experienced enough to defeat a zombie in close combat without taking damage. However, when dealing with larger groups, they were still unprepared. Xiaoyang quickly advised his team to head back to the fortress, where he entrusted Grandpa Shun with a critical task, guarding the weapons warehouse. The safety of the fortress would be in the old man's hands. While Xiaoyang went into the city that night, Grandpa was curious about Xiaoya's plans. Zhangqi wanted to accompany him, but Xiaoyang quickly reassured them there was no need. They weren't ready for the dangers of the city, and it was more important to protect the fortress. He had to trust the old man to handle the defense. Before leaving, Xiaoyang loaded up on melee and ranged weapons and prepared to buy more supplies from the system store. Unfortunately, it was updating too slowly, and he was frustrated. He manually updated the store, and 3 new supply boxes appeared: Black Tech, Life-Saving, and Armed Deterrent. The Black Tech box was the most expensive, and with the manual update cost increasing to 4 points, Xiaoyang had to be careful. Still, he bought the Black Tech supply box. After opening it, a blinding light filled the car, and Xiaoyang was rewarded with a physical enhancement serum that increased his strength by 5 points. The intense flash made him momentarily disoriented, but once the pain subsided, he realized the value of the serum. With his strength now at 13 points, about 2.66 times stronger than an average person, he was ready for the mission ahead. Back at Brother Zay's home, things were tense. His wife was trying to reassure their son, telling him that his father would take care of everything. But Yang Ta's thugs had grown impatient. They broke into the room, and the terrified wife asked what they were going to do. The answer was clear. Yang Ta was going to have his fun. Sadly, in this apocalyptic world, no one would come to her rescue. That was exactly what Yong Tao was counting on. Shally's clothes were being torn apart by a group of thugs, their faces showing not even a hint of shame. Her desperate son struggled, pushing one of them with all his might, trying to protect his mother. Just then Lee, the guy with the ponytail, walked in, his eyes scanning the room as he asked what all the noise was about. One of the goons smirked, saying they were just about to have some fun, and even invited Lee to join them. But Lee wasn't interested. He told them the job wasn't finished yet, and they had no time for distractions. They needed to focus and get it done. Annoyed, one of the thugs grumbled, asking what the big deal was. They'd done this sort of thing plenty of times before. That's when Lee's patience wore thin. He shot the thug a sharp look and reminded him exactly who they were dealing with. This wasn't just anyone. It was Zongshan Zay's wife and kid. If she couldn't take it and end her life, Zay would have nothing left to lose. And when that happened, he'd come after every single one of them. None of them would make it out alive. Still, Lee didn't completely shut him down. He assured the thug that once they took care of Zay, they could come back and break her spirit however they wanted, not letting her rest for a single day. The thug, though disappointed, called Lee a party pooper for ruining the mood. But in the end, he backed off and motioned for the others to leave. Yang Tao threw Xiali a chilling look on his way out, taunting her to wait for her turn. Left alone, Xiali and her son could do nothing but cry, helpless as night fell. Meanwhile, on the deserted streets outside, our boy was behind the wheel, cruising through the city with a lot on his mind. With 13 points in stamina, he now had more than twice the strength of an average person. His reaction time was sharper, and his control had improved significantly as he zoomed through the cluttered streets, drifting around corners with precision. He felt the rush of adrenaline coursing through him. But the city center was up ahead, and he knew driving any further would only attract more unwanted attention. It was time to move on foot. Just as he stepped out of the car, a chilling roar echoed through the empty streets. Turning around, he spotted two zombies charging straight at him, but he didn't flinch. In a swift move, he dodged their attack and slammed his shoulder into one of them with such force that it knocked the other down as well. Without hesitation, he summoned his sword and charged at the zombies, going full throttle. With a single swing, both of their heads flew off in an instant. These zombies were nothing more than punching bags. Now a perfect way for him to test his newfound strength and reflexes. He couldn't help but marvel at how effortlessly he was overpowering them. There was no doubt his physical strength had more than doubled compared to an average person. On top of that, his instincts had sharpened, and with his enhanced hearing, he could tell that his destination was only about 800 m away. Meanwhile, across town, a group of zombies was relentlessly banging their heads against the glass door of a small grocery store. Inside, a handful of survivors were frantically piling heavy objects against the entrance, hoping it would hold long enough for them to figure a way out. Panic filled the air, and amid the chaos, a terrified boy turned to his father, his voice shaking as he asked if they were going to die here. His father, trying his best to stay calm, reassured him that those sons of zombies wouldn't get in, and even if they did, at least they'd be reunited with his mother. Of course, his words did little to comfort the boy, who burst into tears even louder. The officer standing nearby rolled his eyes in frustration. He couldn't believe the nonsense coming out of the father's mouth. What kind of brainless talk was that to give a scared kid? But the father wasn't one to back down. He snapped back, saying if he had enough brains to think things through before speaking, he'd be managing properties by now instead of hiding from zombies. Despite the father's humor, even the big guy was beginning to worry. The constant pounding on the door wasn't stopping. And for a moment, it seemed like they really might not make it out alive. Just as the tension reached its peak, a sudden gunshot echoed through the air. One of the zombies clinging to the door had its head blown apart, sending a shock wave through the group. The boy collapsed to the ground in fear while his father stood frozen, clueless about what just happened. The officers snapped into action, telling them to move the barricade aside and check outside, but not to make any noise. Slowly and carefully, they peeked through the narrow gap, only to realize that all the nearby zombies had already been taken care of. Relieved but still cautious, they stepped outside. The boy's eyes widened in shock as he suddenly blurted out something about a mutant. His father, confused, quickly asked what he meant. In a hushed, shaky voice, the boy explained, it wasn't just an ordinary zombie out there. It was stronger, faster, and deadlier, just like in the comics, novels, and games. The father was getting more and more annoyed with his son, who couldn't stop talking about games, even in the face of danger. Frustrated, he snapped at him, wondering how his son could still be so obsessed with entertainment at a time like this. No wonder his grades were always the worst, the father thought bitterly. Don't forget that this father's name is an old song. So, we'll be calling him that from now on. The officer, growing impatient, turned to him and told him to cut it out. How are grades even relevant right now? They had bigger things to worry about. He urged them to stay focused and keep an eye on their surroundings. After all, they didn't want that mutant zombie ambushing them out of nowhere. As they moved forward, the officer repeated his warning, reminding them to stay alert. Step by step, they carefully made their way toward the base. Eventually, they reached a fork in the path and came to a stop. That's when Old Song's eyes landed across the street. There stood a young man, clearly focused on something. It was none other than our boy, deep in thought, busy adding points to his system and fine-tuning his stats. Before anyone could think, Old Song's son suddenly screamed in panic, pointing at him and shouting that it was a mutant zombie. But the officer, being the only one with some common sense, quickly assessed the situation. This guy didn't look like a zombie at all. He looked like a survivor. Our boy couldn't help but chuckle at the boy's wild imagination and casually told him to stop jumping to conclusions. The officer, now relieved, stepped forward cautiously and warned our boy that it was too dangerous to be wandering around alone. He suggested that they should stick together if they wanted to survive and invited him to join their group. Curious but cautious, Zhang Xiao Yongsheng asked them who they were and why only a few of them were out here. As he scanned the area, the officer explained that they were searching for supplies and mentioned that many civilians were still gathered at Ranch and Garden. The mention of the place triggered a memory in Xiaoyang's mind. He recalled that the Jinyu mansion was nearby, not far from where they stood. Old Song immediately agreed, pointing out that it was just across the street. He then urged Xiaoyang to join them, emphasizing that there was strength in numbers. With Officer Li carrying a gun and their experience dealing with mad zombies, they were confident in their ability to protect him. Of course, they had no clue about our boy's true capabilities. But instead of showing off or bragging about his strength, he simply nodded and agreed to go with them. And with that, they cautiously continued their journey forward, each step taken with care and vigilance. Old Song looked at Zhang Xiaoyang with a curious expression, asking why he wanted to go to Jinyu Mansion. He wondered if there was someone important he was trying to find. Xi Yang simply replied with a yes, offering no further details. But the Old Song wasn't done yet. He pressed on, asking if it was a relative or perhaps a girlfriend. Then, with a somber tone, he reminded Xiaoyang that it was the end of the world and whoever he was looking for was probably already dead. He advised Xiaoyang to prepare himself mentally for that harsh reality. The officer gritted his teeth and nodded. He admitted that even if they hadn't been killed by the Ravagers, there was still a chance they might have run into those beasts. The mention of beasts caught Xiaoyang's attention, and he immediately asked what he meant by that. Officer Li revealed that a group of thugs had taken over the Bichu Mountain Villa area in the eastern part of the city. To survive, they didn't hesitate to harm other survivors. Their group had once encountered them and lost many companions in the process. Officer Li's face darkened at the memory, and he decided not to dwell on it further, simply reminding everyone to stay vigilant when dealing with other survivors. Suddenly, a sharp voice cut through the tense atmosphere. The boy shouted for the officer to be careful. Spinning around, Officer Li spotted a zombie lunging straight at him. Without hesitation, he took it down with a few well-placed shots. He stood there, panting heavily, his heart pounding in his chest. For a brief moment, he thought it was over, but the relief didn't last long. The sound of gunfire had attracted more zombies, and panic quickly set in. Just then, his eyes landed on an abandoned bus nearby. Without wasting a second, he signaled for everyone to run toward it. Xiaoyang, however, grinned to himself, thinking a step ahead. Running blindly could attract even more zombies. But the bus, being a closed shelter, offered solid defense. The only downside, if it got surrounded, there would be no way out. By the time he finished his assessment, everyone had already made it into the bus. Officer Li, still catching his breath, called out to him, urging him to hurry and keep up. Just as the tension reached its peak, Yung Xiaoyang jumped into the bus. And Officer Li wasted no time, slamming the door shut behind him. With urgency in his voice, the officer warned everyone to stay alert and check each seat for any hidden Ravagers. But before anyone could act, the boy shouted, his voice filled with panic, that the zombies weren't giving up. They were still gathering outside. Officer Li gritted his teeth in frustration. Despite their quick escape, the undead were still on their trail, closing in fast. The bus shook violently as the zombies began banging on it there, relentless attacks growing stronger with each passing second. The officer struggled to keep the door shut, but it was clear the pressure was becoming too much for him. Just then, Xi Yang stepped forward and without hesitation slammed the door with such force that the zombies were thrown back and the door sealed shut completely. Officer Li stood there stunned, his jaw hanging open in disbelief. The sheer strength Xi Yang displayed was beyond anything he could have imagined. Without wasting a moment, Yang came up with a plan. He firmly stated that he'd hold the door shut, buying them time, while the others should break the windows and fight back. Surprisingly, Officer Lee nodded, deciding to put his trust in Jang's judgment. Without delay, they shattered the bus windows, and Old Song took the lead, striking down the zombies that tried to cling to the vehicle. The others quickly joined in, making sure Old Dong didn't lose his balance while hanging out the window. Meanwhile, Officer Lee held back from using his bullets, carefully counting his remaining rounds. He knew he couldn't afford to waste them and needed to save them for when things got truly desperate. That's when Yang pulled out a crossbow, casually handing it to the officer. Lee stared at him in confusion, unable to comprehend how Yang had just produced the weapon out of nowhere. Yang simply shrugged and said he'd picked it up earlier, as if it was no big deal. With no time to question further, Old Song and Officer Lee got to work, using the crossbow and their own strength to push back the attacking horde. After what felt like an eternity, they finally managed to clear out the zombies and step out of the bus they had been using as shelter. The boy, now beaming with confidence, puffed out his chest and declared that they had just turned a dangerous situation into a safe one. He was convinced this wasn't mere luck. Surely they were the chosen ones, the children of fate in this apocalypse. But before his excitement could get out of hand, Yang firmly reminded everyone to stay cautious and avoid making the same careless mistakes again. Meanwhile, back at the fort, everyone was anxiously hoping that things would go smoothly for young Xiao. Yiming decided to keep watch. Seeing his sudden enthusiasm, the guy with glasses couldn't help but tease him, asking why he was suddenly so dedicated. Annoyed by the remark, Yiming shot back, telling him to stop talking nonsense. He reminded him that he had always been sincere about his duties. The fatty, realizing he might have pushed too far, quickly backed down and asked why Yiming was getting so worked up over a little joke. Despite the light-hearted moment, Grandpa Shin stepped in, deciding that since Yiming was willing to take charge bravely, everyone else should head back to their rooms and rest. They needed to be well prepared to make the most of Yum's help. Before leaving, he advised Yiming to wake everyone immediately if anything unusual happened. As the night deepened and silence settled over the fort, Yiming sat quietly, realizing how late it had gotten. He knew the others were already fast asleep, but his mind remained focused on his real goal. He was determined to settle things before our boy returned. In the dimly lit room, the old man slept soundly, the key to the weapons room lying just inches from his pillow. Moving with practiced stealth, Lu Yiming quietly opened the door and crept inside. Step by step, he approached the bed, his eyes fixed on the key. Just as his fingers were about to grab it, the old man stirred unexpectedly, his voice breaking the silence as he groggily demanded to know what Yiming was doing. But before he could react further, Yiming landed a solid punch to his face, knocking him out cold. Without wasting a second, Yiming snatched the key and bolted out of the room. The old man, groaning in pain, called after him, shouting for the key to be returned. His cries quickly roused the others, and within moments, the entire fort was in an uproar. As the old man frantically explained what had happened, everyone sprang into action, chasing after Yiming. But Yiming was one step ahead. As he ran, he tossed anything he could find in their path. Chairs, boxes, anything to slow them down. Strangely enough, instead of simply jumping over the obstacles, they all stood there as if frozen, like game characters stuck behind an invisible wall in a restricted area. It was almost comical how easily they were stopped. While making his escape, Yiming noticed the nursery room up ahead. Since he was already in this deep, he figured he might as well go all the way. He slipped inside where Chun Chong, the zombie, was strapped to the bed. As Yiming cautiously approached, the zombie Chun suddenly lashed out with its free hand. Yiming stumbled back in shock. Realizing that only one hand was properly restrained, he wondered if the straps had been too loose when they tied the creature down. Oddly enough, instead of feeling worried, Yiming grinned. If the zombie was already partially free, it would save him the trouble of untying it himself. Meanwhile, the others finally made it past the obstacles. But what they found in the corridor was far from pleasant. Frustration was evident on their faces as they realized Yiming had gone out of his way just to let Chun Chong out of the infirmary. The old man couldn't help but regret not realizing sooner what a snake Yiming was. But Shan Shan quickly reminded him that there was no point in regretting now. They needed to focus on what to do next. With all their weapons locked in a warehouse, their first priority was to make sure the zombie was secured back in the infirmary. Grandpa Shan decided they should use the method Zhang Xiaoyang had taught them earlier. Stay cautious and avoid letting the monster get too close. With that in mind, they cautiously approached the zombie. In a swift move, Zhang Qi grabbed the creature by the neck while the other two quickly pinned its hands down. The old man, taking charge, pointed toward the infirmary and told them to drag it back inside. With a quick countdown of 3, they shoved the zombie back into the infirmary and locked the door as securely as possible. Once the door was shut, Jiang Qi couldn't help but wonder aloud if restraining the zombie had been easier than expected. Surprisingly, everyone else felt the same way. But before they could dwell on it, the old man brought them back to reality, reminding them that they had wasted too much time. By now, that little brat must have already grabbed all the weapons. And just as he finished speaking, Yiming appeared with a smug look, questioning the old man's audacity to call him a little brat. To make things worse, he now had a gun in his hands. Unfortunately for everyone, the storeroom only had one weapon, which annoyed Liu Yiming, but he figured it was enough to deal with them all. Once he was done with them, he could take his time searching for the rest. With the gun pointed straight at them, Yiming ordered them to move back into the room. Zhengyi tried to reason with him, reminding him that it was Zhang Xiaoyang who saved everyone and gave them a chance to survive. But Yiming simply sneered, saying that just because he saved them didn't mean they had to serve him like slaves for the rest of their days. The old man, furious, called him an ungrateful fool. But there wasn't much they could do now. Meanwhile, inside the infirmary, Chen Chong seemed to have his own plans. Watching the heated argument unfold outside, it looked like he was about to make his move. But before anything could happen, the scene shifted to Ranson Garden. There, Officer Li was giving precise directions to young Xiaoyang, explaining how to reach Jinyu Mansion. He warned that the layout of the residential area was complex, making it an easy hiding spot for zombies. Xiaoyang needed to be extra careful. Officer Li advised him to use the side gate of the community instead of the main gate. It would be safer that way. Shi Yang nodded, taking the advice to heart, and assured Officer Li that he'd keep in mind. As he walked toward his next destination, Old Song suggested they should help him out. After all, he had saved their lives by fending off those zombies. But Officer Li wasn't convinced. He reminded Song that they had no idea what was waiting inside Jinyu Mansion. If they accidentally walked into a horde of zombies, it would all be over in an instant. Still concerned, Old Song asked why they were letting Shi Yang walk straight into what seemed like certain death. Officer Li sighed, saying he had already warned the boy as much as he could. There was nothing more to do now but feel sorry for him. However, Li also pointed out that Xiaoyang shouldn't be underestimated. His skills were far beyond ordinary. Meanwhile, outside the mansion, zombies roamed everywhere. And inside, the goons holding Zhang Shangzi's family hostage were getting impatient. One of them grumbled, annoyed that Zhe hadn't returned yet. But another thug, less concerned, declared that he had held in his frustration long enough. Tonight, he was going to take it all out on Zhe's wife. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to sleep. It was clear that these fools were simply waiting for a dead man to walk through the door. However, one of them, smarter than the rest, pointed out that Zhang might already be dead. After all, he had gone out alone. The disgusting thug shrugged and added that when they finally got their hands on the woman, they'd make sure to tie her up tight so she wouldn't even have the chance to take her own life. Hearing their vile plans, the woman trembled in fear, helpless against their cruelty. Finally, the man with the ponytail gave the signal, allowing his men to do as they pleased. But he made one thing clear. Nothing should happen to her, at least not while they were busy with their dirty games. Just then, something outside caught Ponytail's attention. His eyes narrowed as he noticed something unusual. The zombies, every single one of them, had mysteriously dropped dead. He had no idea what was going on, but we know who did this. Curious, Ponytail decided to check it out, wondering if a rescue team had arrived. But before he could take another step, his life came to an abrupt end. The moment he stepped outside, a dagger slashed through his throat, cutting it clean. His head hit the ground with a dull thud, rolling away lifelessly. Meanwhile, the other thugs in the room were ready to claim their prize. Their faces lit up with twisted excitement as they eagerly undid their belts, their eyes filled with sick anticipation. Shally's son clung to her desperately, but they yanked him away without a second thought. A sharp slap landed across Shia's face, silencing her cries. The kid, despite his fear, refused to back down, his tiny fist clenched, ready to fight with everything he had. But the thugs had no patience for his defiance. They kicked him out of the room, slamming the door shut behind him, leaving him alone outside. Just then, the headless body of the guy with the ponytail collapsed to the ground in front of him. The boy stood frozen, his eyes wide in shock. But what stunned him even more was the dark silhouette standing in the doorway. Zhang Xiaoyang glanced down at the trembling boy and calmly asked if Zhang Shangzi was his father. The kid stammered for a moment before nodding, his voice barely escaping his throat. Meanwhile, inside the room, the thugs were already tearing at Xiaoli's clothes as she desperately tried to cover herself. One of them, smug and arrogant, slapped her again, demanding that she scream. But Xiaoli remained silent, refusing to let her son hear her suffering. Frustrated by her resistance, the thug decided to take his turn first before letting the others have their way. Before he could act, the door suddenly slammed open. One of the thugs, thinking it was the brat, tried to fight back, scoffed, and turned toward the door. But before he could even react, his head was sliced clean off, and he fell silent. His friend, clueless to what had just happened, barked at him to stop standing around like an idiot and throw the kid out again. What he didn't realize was that his buddy was already dead, his lifeless body crashing to the floor with a heavy thud. The remaining thugs stood frozen in confusion, their minds struggling to comprehend what was happening. At that moment, Zhang Xiaoyang seized one of the thugs and slammed him hard against the wall. The thug, who had been happily undoing his belt just seconds ago, stuttered in shock, asking who he was. But Xiaoyang didn't bother to answer. He delivered a powerful kick straight to the thug's face, knocking him out cold and ending the fight in an instant. Meanwhile, back at the fort, tension filled the air. Liu Yiming stood with his gun, pointed at everyone, his voice cold and final as he warned them one last time, move, or he would shoot. The old man, seeing no other choice, urged the others to do as the bastard said and step into the room. But Shan hesitated, unwilling to comply. The old man, however, insisted she follow orders for now, reminding her that Yiming had the gun and promising to figure something out later. Yiming smirked, his expression full of arrogance and disgust. He told them there was nothing to figure out, no escape, no clever plan. They hadn't even seen his true ruthlessness yet. He was determined to establish his dominance, once and for all. Without wasting another second, he decided to take down the old man first since he was the one talking the most. The two people standing behind the old man desperately tried to talk him out of it, but before they could finish, a sudden noise froze everyone in place. The infirmary door's lock began to rattle. In the next instant, with a loud swing, the door flew open, leaving everyone in shock. To their disbelief, it was Chun Chong. Somehow, even in his berserk state, he had managed to unlock the door himself. It seemed impossible, ridiculous even, but there he was free, and it was clear he had only one target in mind. His deadly gaze locked onto Yiming like a predator eyeing its prey. Panic washed over Yiming as he quickly raised his gun, determined not to let this monster, who could open locked doors at will, live a second longer. He pulled the trigger without hesitation. But to his horror, the gun jammed. His eyes widened in despair as he realized he was completely screwed. Before he could even react, Chun Chong lunged at him with terrifying speed. In a flash, he tore Yiming apart, ending the reign of the bastard who had kept everyone on edge for so long. But the horror didn't end there. Chun Chong, without a word, dragged Ying's lifeless body toward the infirmary, leaving everyone speechless. They could only watch in stunned disbelief, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Then, in a chilling move, Chun Chong picked up the key to the infirmary door, tossed it aside, and locked himself inside once again, leaving everyone outside, standing in utter bewilderment. Meanwhile, Zhang Xiaoyang had finished dealing with the thugs and finally freed the terrified mother as she clung to her son protectively. Xiaoyang called the boy over to him, but the mother, holding him close, anxiously asked what he intended to do with her son. Without offering any explanation, Xiaoyang simply told the kid to come. After a moment of hesitation, the boy assured his mother that everything would be fine and slowly stepped forward. When he reached him, Xiaoyang handed him a dagger and in a calm, yet firm voice, told him to finish off the thugs. The remaining goons, realizing what was coming, dropped to their knees and started begging for their lives. Even the mother, desperate and afraid, pleaded with Xiaoyang, insisting that her son was just a child. But Xiaoyang's response was unwavering. He stated that the boy wasn't just a kid anymore. Everything changed from this moment on. From now on, he was the one responsible for protecting his mother. And if he wanted to keep her safe, he needed to gather his courage and eliminate the monsters who had hurt her. As the disgusting smirks of the thugs flashed through his mind, a wave of anger surged within the boy. Fueled by rage and newfound determination, he charged at them, striking them down one by one. The mother's horrified gaze never left her son. And though the thugs were finally gone, the boy's heart remained heavy. He knew that no matter how many enemies he defeated, his father was never coming back. Overwhelmed by grief and frustration, he turned to Xiaoyang and asked if his father was really gone. Pushing up daisies now, Xiaoyang, with a heavy heart, gave him a solemn yes. Unable to bear the weight of reality, the boy let the bloody knife slip from his hands and ran straight into his mother's embrace, holding her tightly, searching for comfort in her warmth. Desperate to keep her son safe, the mother turned to Xiaoyang and pleaded with him to take the boy with him, offering to do anything in return. But the boy wiped his tears and declared that he wanted to stay with his mother and protect her himself. Seeing his determination, Xiang made an offer to both of them. He invited them to come with him. He revealed that he had promised Zhang Shenji to keep them safe. With that assurance, the mother and son agreed to follow him, walking past the lifeless bodies of the thugs who had once tormented them. As they moved on, the boy Shuai glanced at the corpses scattered around, fear creeping into his eyes. What terrified him more, however, was the man who had taken them down so effortlessly. Noticing the unease in the boy's face, Xiaoyang, with his usual calm, simply stated that he was the one who had dealt with them all. Just then, Xiaoyang raised his hand, signaling them to stop. His sharp instincts picked up on something suspicious nearby. The scene shifts to Building 8, where a group of litters stands outside, demanding supplies from the terrified residents inside. They shout threats, assuring everyone that if they surrender their resources, they'll be spared. But deep down, everyone knows it's a lie. Inside the apartments, tension fills the air as our team debates whether they should give in. The fear is real. But Officer Lee quickly shuts down the idea, his voice firm. He reminds everyone that these looters are nothing more than animals. They won't keep their word. If they surrender, the men will be killed, and the women, well, they'll suffer a fate worse than death. The pressure is too much for one of the women, and she hesitantly suggests going outside to beg for mercy. But another woman immediately protests, refusing to become a plaything for those monsters. Before the argument can escalate, the gorilla stops them, silencing them both with a calm but commanding voice. There's no need to panic. Surrendering isn't an option. He assures them that they have a plan and instructs them to guard the hallway, confident that the looters won't be able to break through. Meanwhile, outside, the gang leader watches the building with a smirk. He knows they're well armed, but his lackey isn't so sure. The guy voices his doubts, pointing out that forcing their way in won't be easy, especially since the survivors inside are armed and staying hidden, making an ambush even more difficult. But the leader only chuckles, his eyes gleaming with cunning. There's no need for brute force. Instead, he orders his men to cut off the water supply to the first-floor apartments. Smirking, he decides to wait and see how long they can hold out without it. As the looters set their plan into motion, Zhang Xiaoyang stands nearby, watching them carefully. Beside him, little Shuai looks up and innocently asks if these men are bad people. Xiaoyang can't help but find the irony in the question, especially coming from Shuai, the same kid who just took down 3 grown men with nothing but a dagger. Xiaoyang reminds him that these are the same kind of people who bullied his mother, and that's exactly why they need to be dealt with. Back inside, Officer Lee takes charge, instructing everyone to guard the stairs and stay hidden. He plans to check things out himself. Moving cautiously, he creeps over to the window and sneaks a glance outside. 7 looters, all armed, 3 of them carrying guns. Just as he processes the situation, a sudden loud bang echoes through the air, catching him off guard. His heart pounds in his chest as the rest of the group freezes, confusion and fear spreading through them. No one knows what just happened. As the chaos unfolds, bullets tear through the air, ripping apart the thugs. One of their men goes down, and the rest are left clueless, frantically looking around to figure out who's attacking them. That's when Brother Lee spots Zhang Xiaoyang, gun in hand, steadily making his way forward. Without hesitation, Xiaoyang opens fire again. A single shot lands right between the eyes of one of the goons, dropping him instantly. As the remaining thugs spot him standing in the middle of their circle, they panic and start firing their pistols wildly. But the boy just keeps walking, completely unfazed. Not a single bullet even grazes him, and that only makes him smirk. Watching their sloppy aim, he can't help but find their attempts laughable. Raising his gun, Xiaoyang takes aim at the leader hiding behind a concrete block, but his bullets only manage to chip away at the surface. Frustrated, the boss barks at his lackey to stop messing around and fire back properly. One of the thugs finally gathers his courage, stands up with determination, ready to take Xiaoyang down himself. But before he could do anything, Xiaoyang smoothly adjusts his aim and with just a couple of shots, blows the guy's head off. The leader, still crouched behind the block, sneers. In his mind, Xiaoyang must be out of bullets by now. Feeling smug, he decides it's his turn, raising his gun to fire, but Xiaoyang meets his gaze with a cold, unwavering stare, standing tall without a hint of fear. The moment the thug pulls the trigger, young Xiaoyang moves with lightning speed, effortlessly dodging the shot. Before the thug can react, Xiaoyang grabs his arm, the one holding the gun, and in a swift motion turns it upward, pressing the barrel right under his neck. Without a second thought, he pulls the trigger, sending a bullet straight through the thug's skull. Just like that, the entire squad of criminals is taken care of. Without wasting a moment, Xiaoyang rummaged through the leader's dead body, searching for anything useful. Once he's done, he steps into the building only to be greeted by the last remaining goons of the squad. Desperation fuels them as they charge at him. But Zhang Xiaoyang doesn't even flinch. He stays rooted in place, calm and collected. The silence is shattered by 3 crisp gunshots, each perfectly placed, dropping the thugs one after another. Watching all of this, Shuai is over the moon, his excitement barely contained. He's beyond impressed with how effortlessly Xiaoyang handled the fight, and can't help but admire him even more. Just then, a system notification appears in front of Xiaoyang, revealing his next objective. Recruit survivors from Rang, Garden. Completing this task promises a valuable reward. Curious, Xiaoyang asks about these people, and Officer Li responds, explaining that they're from the Bichue villas located to the south of the city. Officer Li quickly called over the two men in yellow jackets, Lu Chao and Shinji, instructing them to brief Xiaoyang about Bichu, since they had just come from the south. Without hesitation, the two men shared what they knew. The people in Bichu weren't just survivors. They were an organized gang, well-armed and well-supplied, holed up in Bichu villas. They had taken in nearly all the survivors from the southern regions. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaoyang paused for a moment, memories from his past life flooding back. He couldn't help but wonder if Bichu was where Luxong and Kejing settlements had been. Could it be them who had taken over? He turned to Lu Chao and Shinji, asking if they meant that Bichu was the only settlement left in the south. One of the men nodded, explaining that it hadn't always been this way. The gang, armed to the teeth, had crushed smaller settlements one by one. Wherever they went, they slaughtered half the population, abducted young women, and recruited anyone willing to submit. Zhang Xiaoyang was sure now. He knew exactly who was behind this. Officer Li, noticing his certainty, asked what he meant. Without hesitation, Xiaoyang pointed out that the three guys they had just taken down were carrying handguns, which meant there were likely more of them out there. He told the men to hold on to the guns and check for extra magazines. There was no doubt they'd need them. Handing over his rifle to Officer Li, Xiaoyang told him to keep it, adding that he'd leave them with 5 magazines. He warned that the beach crew wouldn't let this go easily, but with these weapons, 10 or so men should be able to hold their ground. Xiang then instructed them to stay put for a couple of days while he reorganized things back home. After that, he would return and personally deal with the Bichue gang. His words left one of the men standing nearby in shock. He pointed out that the gang was probably dozens of times stronger, if not more. It wasn't a small task to go against them. Officer Li, clearly concerned, tried to talk him out of it. He suggested that it wasn't worth the risk and that they could always look for another place to settle. But Xiaoyang simply told him not to worry. He already had unfinished business with the Bichu crew. Besides, in a few days, he planned to come back with a bigger vehicle and evacuate everyone to the east of the city near the old Tea City where he was building a stronghold. He would need all the help he could get. With that, Xiyang turned to leave, casually tossing a goodbye over his shoulder and telling them to take care of themselves. At the Bichu mountain base, zombie bodies were hanging like grim decorations. Inside, Li Shuzhang was attending a meeting held around a table. A man wearing glasses, Chief Lin, questioned Lai Shukong on whether he had fixed the supply issue yet. Shukong answered that he had dispatched people to handle the situation and expected them back shortly. Another member, named Kai, noted that many allies were staying in their mansion and they could not simply raid the entertainment district to get supplies. Lai Shuxiang clarified that everyone was in the same situation and he had already sent his team to collect all the people and goods. However, Lin asked if he had truly failed the only task he had been assigned. So far, Lu Zhang attempted to reassure him, stating that everything would work out perfectly this time. Later on, Lu Zhang asked about the location of his subordinates since the group had not returned. One man explained that a reinforcement squad had been sent an hour prior to investigate, but they had also failed to return. They had all been killed. Lai Shuzhang was stunned to hear they were killed by regular civilians at Rangzang Garden and could not grasp how many armed men had failed. Consequently, he ordered a gathering of everyone, intending to ensure they would not fail again. Meanwhile, Xiaoyang was heading back to his base. Shanshan got excited when she heard the car approaching. Upon his arrival, he finished the mission and gained 25 more system points, bringing his total to 36. Shanshan felt relieved to see him return. Xiaoyang asked if Yiming was a traitor. Surprised, Shanshan asked if he had been aware of that the entire time. Instead of answering, Xiang told Zhang Qi to take Xiali and her son to the infirmary. Afterward, they asked if he really knew Yiming was the traitor. Xiaoyang clarified that he wasn't certain, but he had a suspicion that one of Zhang Qi's friends was a problem. Because of this, he had only left a fake weapon in the armory to avoid larger risks. Grandpa Shun then mentioned another significant topic. He noted that Chong, who was in the infirmary, was acting strangely. Xiaoyang replied that he already knew Chong was a special zombie and an extremely rare mutant. Entering the infirmary, Xiaoyang asked if Chong understood him and instructed him to blink 3 times if he did. Chong complied. Xia Lying explained that after the apocalypse began, some of the infected underwent different mutations. These rare mutants possessed higher intelligence and more potential than standard zombies, and they could keep pieces of their previous memories. He noted they were very fortunate that Chong was one of these rare types. As Chong walked, he intentionally stepped on Yiming's head, then gave a small grin and waved playfully at his friends. Xiaoyang decided there was no reason to wait any longer and gave the order to finish Yiming off. Chong then pulled Yiming away. Zhang Qi asked if Chong still recognized him. Chong stared at him for a second and then pretended to grab his crotch. This caused Zhang Qi to complain that he was still the same fool and that even as a zombie, he should keep his hands to himself. It was obvious Chong had only done it to tease him. Afterward, Xiang reviewed his system. He had unlocked an achievement for possessing a mutant ally, which granted him 10 additional points and brought his total to 46. The system store displayed a level 1 medical supplies box, a level 1 weapons box, and a level 2 high-tech box priced at 50 points. Xiaoyang noted that this was his first time seeing a level 2 box, though he found the cost quite high. He chose to purchase the 2 level 1 boxes first, saving the level 2 option for when his points increased. Following these purchases, he had 36 points remaining. From the first box, he obtained an interdimensional infection blocker, which could prevent or stop an infection in its early stages, even if someone was contaminated, though was unable to reverse a full mutation. Inside the second box, he discovered a sniper rifle along with a large amount of ammunition. He felt the boxes were very valuable since he now had the literal ability to stop a person from becoming a zombie. Next, he examined his upcoming mission, which offered 25 points for successfully recruiting the survivors from Ranching Garden. He decided to open the level 2 box at a later time and set out for the mission the following day. Meanwhile, outside, Chong was disposing of Yiming's body. The next morning, Xiaoyang started the initial marksmanship and shooting drill with the group using cans and bottles for target practice. After some time, he told Shin to bring everyone together because there were survivors in Ranxin Garden and he intended to relocate them to the base later that day. Chong was picked to accompany him on this task. During the journey, they encountered an abandoned bus blocking the road and had to clear out all the zombies inside by force. After that, Xiang gave Chong the key to unlock his muzzle. He explained that Chong didn't need to wear it while they were alone, but he would have to put it back on once they entered Ranxin Garden to avoid frightening anyone. At the same time, Lu Zhang was organizing his task force with the intent of finishing the mission once and for all. He was determined not to suffer another loss against Rungun Garden. Using the bus he had claimed, Xiaoyang moved forward without pausing, driving over any zombies in his path and maneuvering through the abandoned vehicles on the road. There was no traffic to stop him, so he used the opportunity to clear the route without concern. Meanwhile, in the 8th building, the survivors met to divide the small amount of food they had left. Despite their hardships, everyone remained alive. A boy staying there with his father heard a vehicle getting closer. The group's police officer went to check and saw that it wasn't Xiaoyang arrives, but a group of thugs. They were heavily armed and clearly prepared to attack and seize the building. The officer identified them as the bandits from Bichue Mountain and cautioned that they were not friends. Song noted that they were seeking revenge this time and felt confident since they were also armed. However, the officer pointed out that the enemy still held the advantage of the terrain. He quickly headed to the rooftop to secure a better vantage point, telling the rest of the group to stick to the agreed-upon plan. Meanwhile, Lu Zhang and his men repositioned themselves slightly to find a suitable vantage point to fire at the building. They readied their submachine guns and unleashed a coordinated volley of gunfire. Lu Zhang then picked up a loudspeaker to threaten the occupants and issue a warning. Before he could speak, however, one of his allies was killed by a shot to the head and another was brought down by a shot to the leg. The shooter was the police officer who was well positioned on the rooftop with his AK-47. This caught the enemy group off guard, as they had been misinformed that the residents only possessed a pistol. A surprised Li Shu Zhang remarked that he didn't know how they had obtained an automatic rifle. Under the circumstances, he stated they needed to retreat, but commanded everyone to wait for his signal. One impatient man tried to run too early and was killed by a headshot. It was only after the signal that they began a disciplined withdrawal. Even so, they were picked off one by one. Realizing the battle was lost, Lai Shu Xiang used his own subordinates as bait to distract the marksman. He managed to reach the car, abandoning a wounded comrade who was promptly killed by the officer's fire. Meanwhile, Xiang remained on the road. During his drive, he encountered Lai Shuang's car, but decided to let them pass as he had a more pressing objective to complete. Arriving at the 8th building, Xiaoyang noted that the AK-47 he had been given had proven very useful. Seeing the corpses on the ground, Chong showed significant interest. Since he was hungry, Shi Yang permitted him to feed on the bodies, explaining that they were enemies who would have turned into zombies regardless. Chong began consuming the remains, satisfying his hunger and regaining strength by eating human flesh. As they walked past the bodies, Chong commented that Officer Hong Li had eliminated many enemies. The boy watching from the window recognized Xiaoyang and came down to meet him. Hong Lu and his group gathered with Xiaoyang on the ground floor. Xiaoyang asked if they were the ones who had handled the bandits, and Hong Li proudly confirmed it, noting that the weapon had made defending themselves much easier. They then heard an unusual noise. A zombie was approaching, and a startled group aimed their weapons at it. It was Chong, but because no one recognized him yet, the atmosphere was tense. Xiaoyang calmed them down, explaining that Chong was with him. Hongla still found it strange to have a zombie as an ally. Xiaoyang clarified that Chong was no ordinary zombie and promised to explain the details during the trip. They gathered everyone and boarded the bus to depart. Before leaving, Xiaoyang told Chong to eat as quickly as possible. Later, Chong put on his muzzle, which also served as a mask to avoid frightening the others. The boy asked if Chong had put the mask on himself, and Shi Ying warned him to be careful speaking that way around Chong, as he was easily offended and might react poorly. When Chong stepped onto the bus, his weight caused the vehicle to rock, impressing Hong Li with his strength. After Chong finished eating, he tried to return the bus key to Xiaoyang and mumbled a few words. It was evident that consuming human flesh had caused him to evolve. He was now able to speak basic words similar to a child learning to talk. This suggested he would grow even stronger and more intelligent in the future. Despite him not being a normal zombie, they continued their trek back to the base. Meanwhile, Lu Xiang returned in a state of defeat and dejection. Back at the base, he was severely reprimanded for failing once again. He attempted to defend himself by saying he didn't know the enemies possessed an automatic rifle, but Chief Lin did not believe him. When Lin questioned how peasants could obtain such a weapon, Lai Shu Zhang suggested they send someone to verify it themselves. At that moment, Kai knocked him down with a kick and threw him out of the room, calling him a failure. As Lai Shukong departed, another member remarked that Kai only wanted to smash Fatty's girlfriend. Kai denied this sarcastically in his own defense. The boss told everyone to settle down, stating they would find the right time to handle the situation. Overhearing this, Lai Shu Zhang was furious. Later at his home, he began breaking things in a fit of rage. His gold digger plastic girlfriend tried to calm him, urging him to control himself. But Lu Zhang was resolute. He told her not to pack anything because they were abandoning the place. Deeming it too unsafe, he planned to flee and ordered that the remaining survivors be gathered to escape at midnight. Meanwhile, the bus carrying the survivors from Ranjiang Garden pulled into Xiaoyang's base. By recruiting the 5 individuals from a garden, Xiaoyang fulfilled his mission, but since he brought a total of 8 survivors, he secured 5 bonus points. This brought his total to 66 points. He then informed Chong that they would be heading to the southern part of the city the following night. Hong Li questioned why they would venture into such a perilous area, and Shi Yang clarified that he had unresolved matters to settle with the people from Beachway Mountain Villa. Later, while in his room, Xiaoyang consulted his system once more, prepared to purchase the final level 2 high-tech crate. He spent 50 points on the crate, leaving him with 16 points remaining and hoped the investment would be worthwhile. Upon opening it, he discovered a physical enhancement serum plus 20. He was struck by how valuable such an item was for a level 2 crate. After applying the serum, his physical attribute climbed to 33 points, making him more than 6 times stronger than a typical human. His reflexes improved so significantly that he was able to catch an insect out of the air without effort. Afterward, Xiang prepared to board the bus for his next expedition to handle the remaining issues. While practicing with his weapons, Honglin noticed him leaving and asked if he could assist in any way. Xiaoyang suggested that he stay to guard the base, noting that Hong Lu was a skilled marksman who could also train the other survivors. Hong Lu agreed, noting that training was his specialty. With that, Xiaoyang and Chong departed on the bus for their mission. In the meantime, at the Beachway base, Lu Zong attempted to flee with his group under the cover of night. However, they were immediately intercepted by a car carrying Chief Dong Shu. Dong Shu questioned where he thought he was going, and Lai Shu Zhang tried to lie, claiming he was simply on his way to Rangxian Garden to finish a mission. To expose the lie, Dong Shu ordered the truth to be shown, and his men threw the corpse of one of Li Hu Xiang's messengers directly in front of him. When one of Lu Xiang's subordinates tried to intervene by claiming the man was a friend, a nervous Lu Xiang punched him and insisted he had never seen the man before. Dong Shu and his men then opened fire, killing all of Lu Zhang's subordinates and leaving only Lu Zhang alive. Crui, Dong Shu mentioned that someone in the car had a very loose mouth. At that moment, Li Shu Xiang realized that Kajang had betrayed him by telling them everything. He became enraged, questioning how she could do such a thing. Kai wanted to know what to do with Lai Shu Xiang, and Boss Lin ordered his immediate execution. With no way to defend himself, Lu Zhang was hanged and left in front of the base as a grim warning to any other potential traitor. After some time, Xiaoyang arrived with the bus, and that was the first thing he saw. He recognized Lai Shu Zhang's cruel fate and told himself it was deserved. Even so, he saw a use for him. He freed the now zombified body and remarked that despite such a tragic end, Lu Zhang could still help him get revenge. Meanwhile, inside the Beachway base, There was a disgraceful scene that does not deserve a detailed description. Hai Jing was wearing extremely revealing clothes and was clearly involved in an intimate situation with Lin. While they were distracted, Kai heard a strange noise coming from outside. He peeked out and saw the guards were dead as someone knocked on the door to draw their attention. Xiaoyang approached stealthily from behind without giving them a chance to react. He slit Kai's throat, killing him silently, and then threw another knife with precision into Lin's head, killing him instantly and spraying blood everywhere. Terrified, Jing recognized Xiaoyang and asked how he had gotten there and what he wanted. Xiaoyang observed the situation and sarcastically noted how much fun she seemed to be having, commenting on what Li Shuqiang would think if he saw that. Jing tried to react, but had no time. Xiaoyang released the zombie Lu Zhang, who completely ignored his former ally and went straight for Jing, who was now tied up and unable to resist. She died in a miserable and cruel way, devoured by the one she had betrayed. Later, Xiaoyang instructed Chong to feed on the bodies scattered throughout the base. Meanwhile, with his new superhuman senses, Shurao Yang heard something coming from a nearby building. They were the voices of hostages being threatened by the bandits. One said a child would be perfect as meat, but the boss, an obese man, disagreed, saying she was too skinny and suggested taking another chubbier boy. The child was torn from her mother's arms while she begged for mercy, crying and pleading for them to spare her son. In the midst of that horror, they heard a loud crash outside. The boss thought it was the sound of a shotgun, but another reminded him only that he had such a weapon. Just as the child was handed back to her mother, the door slowly opened. The boss ordered one of the men to check, but he regretted it immediately. He was violently grabbed by Chong, who appeared like a predator. The bandits fired desperately, but couldn't stop him. Chong smashed through the window as if it were paper, broke the boss' neck, and massacred all the remaining criminals with brutal force, sparing only the hostages. The people, terrified, didn't know what to think of that monster and wondered what kind of zombie he was not to attack them. Xiaoyang arrived shortly after and praised Chong's work, noting he didn't even need to remove his mask. Chong commented that the mask made everything more fun. The hostages were still scared to see a talking zombie, especially a child who said he was a powerful monster that had killed everyone. Xiaoyang reassured the group, explaining that Chong wouldn't attack them. The mother of the child said she had seen something similar before, mentioning that in the eastern part of the city, there was a similar creature. Xiaoyang reflected on this, surprised that these mutations were appearing so soon. He had thought it would take another month or two for such cases to become common. The city of Der, located to the east, wasn't very far from there. He concluded that, like Chong, there were other rare mutants. Some zombies, depending on the individual, could retain part of their sanity and memory, turning into extremely efficient killers. But there were also unstable mutations that were far more violent and dangerous to everyone. Chong asked Xiaoyang if he was like those dangerous mutants. Xiaoyang explained that he didn't need to worry because he wasn't like that. In fact, he told Chong that he was one of the luckiest, and with Xiaoyang around, he would never lose his sanity. Then Xiaoyang asked if there were any other survivors in that place. The people replied that there were still several locked rooms and mentioned that there were people alive in the basement. When they went down there, and they found a terrible scene. It looked like a human slaughterhouse full of human remains. Xiaoyang thought that might explain why there were no other survivor groups in that area. They must have killed so many people on purpose. He considered that either the meat had been wasted because there weren't enough people to eat it or it was being used to feed zombies. Xiaoyang asked about the situation in an office they had mentioned earlier. One of the men explained it was about a kilometer away near the south gate, where several people had been locked up and would probably suffer the same fate. That was when Xiaoyang received a new mission from the system called Utopia Subpar. The goal was to expand and improve the community, aiming for the highest score possible. At that moment, he had only 2 progress points and would earn 20 system points upon completing the objective. In addition to the 36 he already had at the sales office previously mentioned, the guards heard the sound of gunfire coming from the north gate. Before long, Chong appeared and eliminated all the enemies without any difficulty. The women being held as hostages in a ruined room were terrified by the shots and the sounds of the door being forced open. When they finally saw it was Shurao Yang, they were relieved as he allowed them all to leave. Soon, a line of survivors followed behind Xiaoyang as they moved through the destroyed area filled with corpses. The people remained shaken by the experience. One of the women asked if he was truly offering them a safe place to stay. Xiaoyang confirmed that he was, though he explained that everyone would be required to work. The survivors agreed immediately, appearing excited at the prospect of a secure shelter. Xiaoyang encouraged them not to waste time, and everyone boarded the bus to head toward the base. When they arrived, Shan remarked with relief that he had finally returned, but Jiang Qi warned the group not to open the gate yet. Since Xiaoyang had not yet given a clear order, he explained that while this was his fortress, he could not let everyone inside immediately. Recognizing the hardships of the current era, he noted that he had built a small housing complex next to the fortress. He stated that while the place was not as secure as the main base, it was far better than the horrible conditions they had been rescued from. He mentioned that there were still many unfinished buildings and that everyone would need to work to improve them. He promised that those who proved themselves worthy would eventually have the chance to enter the main fortress. Meanwhile, that morning at the Beachway Mountain Villa, a delivery truck arrived with a woman in the lead car. She was impatient, noticing that no one was answering the radio and complaining about Lin's incompetence. Sensing something was wrong, she opened the door to one of the rooms and discovered the dead bodies of Lin and Kai, along with the signs of the massacre Xiao Yang had left behind. The first to react was Lai Shuang, but she knocked him down with a single punch and finished off the other enemies with knife strikes. She told her men they had no choice but to handle everything themselves, declaring that anyone who broke the rules would die. As they walked through the village, they saw the trail of destruction and numerous scattered corpses. A subordinate remarked to Rui that no one was left alive. Even so, they noticed there was still enough meat stored at the base, and Rui ordered them to load it all into the truck. While doing this, she noticed something that worried her even more. Fresh tire tracks on the ground, which were clear evidence of who had been there. Meanwhile, Xiang was analyzing his new mission to expand the community. It was a type of goal he had never seen before, requiring him to accumulate the highest possible score, with population growth being essential for survival. He reflected on the fact that the land was fertile and thought about how even the work of his arrogant enemies had helped prepare it. Recalling the matter of the rare mutants, Xiaoyang went to the shelter where the new survivors were gathered. Many called him their savior, kneeling and bowing in his presence. He asked them not to do that. Maintaining a serious tone, he then asked the woman who had mentioned the monster exactly where she had seen the creature. She explained it had been at the market in Decor City. She told him that she and her group had gone there for supplies when they encountered the terrible creature. Many were killed, causing widespread panic. She had managed to escape with her daughter and ran toward Beachway Mountain, thinking they would be safe, only to be captured by bandits. Xiaoyang thought about Decor City, and Shan tried to talk him out of going, saying he didn't need to face the creature since they had enough supplies. Xiaoyang, however, argued that they could not remain idle because acquiring more resources would benefit everyone. He considered the most important factor to be that Decor City was only 2 kilometers away, and they could not allow that monster to become a threat to the base. The woman, frightened, tried to stop him by saying the creature killed anyone it saw. Xiaoyang confidently replied that he knew what he was doing. He asked Zhang Qi to call Chong because they were going to visit the city to solve the problem. In Decor City, another group of survivors gathered inside an old real estate office. Among them, an arrogant man argued with his secretary about searching for supplies in a nearby supermarket. The manager, who knew the area, believed there might still be items there, though another man was more pessimistic, suggesting it had likely been looted already. The secretary tried to keep the group hopeful, reminding them that even looted markets usually have something useful left behind. When they finally entered the supermarket, they found a dark and eerie environment. They managed to find some supplies, though they were few. Soon, a strange sound emerged from the darkness. A small horde of zombies appeared and was eliminated with some effort by the survivors, who found the setting very unsettling. They decided to quickly grab what they could and leave. However, deep in the shadows, a silent mutant watched them, waiting for the right moment to strike. While the survivors gathered goods, the secretary lay down on an old bed to rest, suggesting they could turn the place into an improvised base. Outside, the manager and another man smoked and discussed the plan. One asked if it was safe to stay, but the manager admitted he wasn't sure. The group analyzed them all and noticed its many entrances and exits made it difficult to defend. They also knew a place with so many supplies would attract other survivors. As he explained this, one of the men was suddenly caught off guard when a blade sliced through his throat. The attack came from a mutant who killed him, remarking that fresh meat was the best. One survivor tried to flee, screaming for help, but only managed a few steps before being cut in half. The others panicked and ran in fear, but the mutant warned that no one would escape. One by one, they were all killed brutally. The secretary got closest to the door, running with all her hope, but something reached her. It was Chong, who completely ignored her and kept going. Then Xiaoyang appeared and tried to calm her, telling her not to be afraid. The secretary recognized him as the boy who had bought that piece of land, and he remembered her as well. Her name was Ningwan Wan, and she had sold him the land. She confirmed this, but warned that they needed to run because of a monster or ghost in the building. Xiaoyang, however, said everything was fine and assured her the monster would soon be eliminated. When Ningwan Wan looked to the side, she was shocked to see Chong fighting the large mutant. Chong defended himself easily, even against heavy attacks. The mutant asked if he intended to handle the fight alone, and Chong replied that he would try. Holding his opponent firmly, Chong pushed him away with surprising force. The furious mutant remarked that there was another one like Chong and that this would be fun. He showed he was faster and stronger, explaining that eating several bodies had accelerated his evolution. Even so, he did not expect Chong's blows to be so heavy. After taking a punch, he was thrown against the concrete and admitted Chong was strong, only to immediately receive a kick to the head. The mutant managed to dodge at the last second and, clinging to the ceiling, declared that the power he had accumulated from eating so much was finally becoming useful. He then underwent another transformation, becoming even more dangerous. Chong and the mutant began trading blows at impressive speed. Xiaoyang watched the fight and remarked that Chong was in trouble. Recognizing the enemy's power, Xiaoyang thought the trip was worth it as the creature would only become more dangerous if not killed now. Without hesitation, Xiaoyang pulled an AK-47 from his inventory, which surprised Wan, who didn't understand how he made a gun appear from nowhere. Xia asked Chong to hold the mutant for a moment, promising it wouldn't take long. Chong grabbed the mutant's hands tightly, allowing Xiaoyang to shoot straight at the creature's head. The mutant survived the initial shot, admitting Xiaoyang was different for being able to hurt him, but swore he would now kill him. Xiaoyang was shocked the shot wasn't enough but did not stop. He fired for several seconds until the mutant's head looked like a sieve, ending the threat. After the battle, Xiaoyang asked why Chong had not eaten the mutant's body, suggesting it might make him stronger. The system quickly notified him that he had received another mission point for removing a danger to the community. Satisfied, Xiaoyang said that since they were there, they would not leave empty-handed. They decided to clear out all available supplies, and he used his spatial ring to store everything. Jiang Qi watched, always finding Shirwang impressive. Xiaoyang remarked that instead of letting the bodies turn into monsters, he wanted to know if Chong was still hungry. Meanwhile, not far away, Rui and her subordinate were carefully observing Xiang's base. They studied the guards and the number of people inside, concluding that while the group was decent in size, they were poorly armed, a weakness they could exploit. The driver asked if this was the same man who had defeated the Bishui group. Rui confirmed it was, recalling that they had used stealthy tactics to take down the other faction. She mentioned she had already warned people from the district that the area was unsafe. To Rui, it looked like a divine gift, a new location to turn into her own base. Her companion even joked that he almost felt guilty. When the driver asked if the plan was to attack immediately, Rui was clear that they would not. They would return to plan better, regroup, and bring heavier weapons to attack with everything they had. Meanwhile, Xiaoyang and his group were heading back to their base. When asked if the place was truly as good as described, Jiang Qi confirmed it was, mentioning they even had hot showers. Wan became excited at the idea, but Xiaoyang quickly noticed something strange. Seeing people approaching, he told everyone to arm themselves, and Jiang pulled out his machine gun. As one car passed the other, Xiang stared at Rui and received a new mission from the system called Nemesis Villain Volume 1. He needed to resist the enemy invasion to earn 50 system points. Shan wondered if that woman was planning to invade his base. Later, Xiaoyang spoke with Shan, asking if she had seen anything suspicious that day. She mentioned seeing a car in the distance without knowing its direction, and asked if he had noticed anything strange. Xiaoyang suggested they asked Grandpa Shun to call everyone for a meeting because they had an important announcement. Meanwhile, at a coal mine in the southern suburbs, some survivors were walking around using communicators. They had been lured there by a message promising a base. They were searching for the exact location when Rui's car and her team approached. She asked if they had come because of the message and if they wanted to see the base. The survivors confirmed they had. Impressed by Rui's appearance, she replied they had arrived at the right time, asking them to follow her. The men showed suspicious intentions. Later, at the base built in the coal mine, the group was very impressed by the scale of the place, saying they had finally found a good home. One of them asked for a bathroom, and Rui smiled, telling him to follow her. While the two of them were in the bathroom, Rui followed the man inside. He seemed to pick up on what he thought were her intentions and told her not to be shy. However, Rui did not hesitate and press a knife to his neck. She explained coldly that she thought they would be good survivors, but they turned out to be a disappointment. When she finished, Rui calmly returned and saw that her subordinates had already completed the rest of the work. All the survivors were dead. She stated they would soon call for transport to take the bodies away. Back at Xiaoyang's base, everyone had gathered. Hungi asked if someone really wanted to attack and who they were. Xiaoyang explained they lacked clear information on the enemy, but needed to prepare for an attack at any moment. He said that Chong and Jiang would go with him to finish the construction of the unfinished structures and that they planned to temporarily move the refugees there. Many people, including little Xia Yu, volunteered to help, showing a willingness to cooperate. Wan, noticing the tension, decided she would go as well. Hong Li and Grandpa Shang were left in charge of defending the base, while the rest of the group went to the abandoned buildings to salvage what they could. This task force reached the unfinished buildings and had to eliminate numerous zombies upon arrival. In the end, no one was hurt. Chong took the opportunity to eat, and Xiang told everyone they would stay there for now, since an attack could happen in the coming days. Some refugees volunteered to fight and help with the defense. Xiaoyang said that was fair, but first asked them to clean the entire place. He explained that he would later send weapons and ammunition, and that everyone must follow orders and communicate via radio. Meanwhile, Rui was busy preparing all of her weaponry for the upcoming assault. During this time, it was revealed that she also had a mutant within her own forces. She informed her group that they needed to take the attack very seriously because the people at that base had completely wiped out the village. One of the men questioned who exactly had performed that feat. Rui replied that it was a group located in the eastern suburbs and announced that they would begin the attack the following morning. Throughout the night, Xie Yang was checking his system. He had accumulated 46 points. He considered what he could buy and decided to purchase the Level 2 Awakened Powers box for 5 points along with the Level 2 Post-Apocalyptic Farmers box and the Level 1 Supplies box. He bought them all at once since he had enough points. In the Awakened Powers box, Xiang gained the Physical Strength Overload ability, which was capable of increasing all his stats by 25% for a limited time. However, once the effect wore off, he would be temporarily weakened. He calculated that with his current 33 strength points, using the overload would push him past 40, which was the equivalent of 8 times the strength of a normal human. He was excited to test this new ability. The next morning, Rui set out with all her people and weapons to attack Xiaoyang base. She explained the strategy to everyone, saying that the first group should drive to the shelter and kill all the refugees. Meanwhile, the other group would try to open the metal gate. The mutant in their group showed enthusiasm, saying he was hungry. At Xiaoyang's base, Hong Lu was analyzing the terrain and commented that he had found good spots for cover, even if the view was a little more limited than from the watchtower. Xiaoyang told him not to worry, since that would not be a big problem. Hongyi asked why. That was when Xiaoyang remembered that Hong Lu had worked as a sniper for years. Hong Lu corrected him, saying he had only worked for a few months, but Xiaoyang asked if he could shoot accurately between 100 and 200 m. Hong interrupted, saying there was no need to worry because he could shoot well up to 500 m. Xiaoyang thought that was more than enough. Soon after, Zhang appeared carrying something very heavy. When he opened the crate, everyone saw it was a Barrett, which was an impressive elite weapon. Hong was surprised, saying he was not even sure he should be touching something of that level. Xiaoyang said he could use it, but warned they only had 2 magazines, meaning 10 bullets in total. Even so, Hong Lu was thrilled with the weapon. Xiaoyang then asked Zhang if the rest of the people were ready. If they were, they should put everyone on alert since the enemy could arrive at any moment. Later, Shan noticed something different on the horizon. Hong Lu said he saw it, too, and thought it was probably the enemy. At the same time, one of Rui's subordinates noticed that the refugees who should have been in that area were gone. He suggested they might have been eaten by zombies. The driver asked if they should stop the car to check, but Rui was direct, saying no. She ordered them to go even faster, explaining that if the enemy saw them approaching at high speed, it would make the attack harder to contain. All of Rui's units advanced together. On the other side, Shan confirmed they were enemies and told everyone to open fire. Rui's group's vehicles were hit along with the drivers who died in the shootout. The first car to lose its driver ended up exploding in the distance. Rui questioned how they had been spotted so easily. Even though she was irritated, she ordered everyone to keep advancing until they reached the wall of the enemy base. That was the moment for the mutant to use his large saw to try to cut through the steel gate. Inside the fortress, Shan warned everyone there was someone trying to break the gate. They needed to shoot, but the people on the street were already ready to fight back. Amid the gunfire, even Kai ended up getting shot in the shoulder, and Jinong warned everyone to be careful, even recognizing the enemy was well armed. One of the men in the base said not to be afraid because they had enough ammo. Meanwhile, the gate kept being cut. Xiaoyang told everyone to relax, saying he had a plan to deal with it, and ran to another part of the base. In the street, one of Rui's subordinates commented that they had already used up half their ammo. Then was when a mutant finally managed to open the gate with the saw. Everyone ran to provide cover while Rui looked curious to see how they would handle the mutant. She ordered everyone to rush in at the same time while the mutant pushed the gate open. Inside the base, Xiang signaled to Hong Li to wait for his command, explaining that he wanted him to aim at the biggest enemy and that he needed to eliminate him with the next shot. The survivors were terrified when they saw the mutant enter. Normal bullets did not penetrate its flesh, which also regenerated quickly with each hit. Watching this, Rui sarcastically commented that they seemed shocked because it was the first time they had seen an evolved mutant. Xiaoyang explained to Hong Li that normal weapons would not work, but his would. With just one shot from Barrett, he blew off not just the mutant's head, but also part of its neck and torso. Rue was completely shocked to see that and wondered if they really had weapons of that caliber. At that moment, Xiaoyang appeared, firing his AK at the attackers and completely pinning them down. The enemies tried to flee to their vehicles. Ray, furious, cursed Xiang as that damn kid, and even threw one of her own subordinates in front of the bullets to escape, tossing his body forcefully. Even so, Xiaoyang managed to dodge the attacks, and told Hong Lu she was trying to get away. Hong Lu fired again and hit Rue's leg, causing her to fall to the ground. Although he considered the shot a mistake for not killing her, she was pulled into the car by her men and managed to escape even though she was badly wounded. Xiang said it was fine because they would get their revenge later. The mission Nemesis Villain Volume 1 was completed successfully. He had repelled the invaders and received 50 reward points from the system. The mission to expand the community was also helped by the victory, as he gained morale among his members, earning 2 more points. In total, he now had 76 system points. Next, he received the new mission Nemesis Villain Volume 2, which required attacking the enemy base and eliminating the cannibals to receive another 50 points. Even so, he reassured the group by saying he knew exactly where the enemies had gone. The people celebrated the victory, pleased that they had not lost anyone from the fortress, even though there were some injured. Xiaoyang ordered everyone to be taken to the infirmary immediately to disinfect their wounds. He also asked for all the bodies inside the fortress to be removed and for the refugees who had been relocated to the abandoned building to be brought back. He was very satisfied with the number of points he had earned so far. Meanwhile, Rui was returning to her own base, now missing a leg. Her men were shocked to see her in that state and asked what had happened to her. Rui, irritated, admitted that she had not been careful enough and confessed that she did not know the enemy possessed that kind of weapon. Noticing her subordinates' suspicious looks, she asked why they were staring at her like that. She complained that she needed to eat meat to recover and demanded their obedience. The man who had previously controlled the mutant asked if she had really sunk to that level and dared to speak to him in that manner. Rui, furious, asked if everyone was rebelling against her and ordered her men to take him down. However, they remained silent and did not obey her. The man then declared that she was missing a leg and that the number 2 in the group, the mutant, was dead, which made him the most powerful person now. He also stated that everyone was tired of putting up with her. Rui, panicking, asked if they were really rebelling against her, but she was surrounded and brutally killed by her own men who lynched her to death. Soon after, they called that subordinate the 3rd boss, but he declared that he was now the 1st. Even so, one of the men warned him that their defenses were very weakened since Rue and the mutant were dead and many of them had been lost in the battle. They especially feared encountering that other man again. The new boss understood that he was talking about the guy known as the Tentacle Man, but he replied that they might think about looking for shelter later. Later on, Xiaoyang and Zhang arrived at the coal mine. They confirmed it really was the hideout of those cannibals. Xiaoyang told them to advance carefully and make noise to confuse anyone who might still be around. They passed by Rui's destroyed body along the way. Hong Li commented that they were monsters for having killed their own people. Xiaoyang replied that it was not surprising at all. Zhang, remembering the large mutant they had fought, remarked that it was quite different from Chong. Hong Lu agreed, saying he had heard something about evolution and asked what exactly an evolved being was and how someone reached that point. Xiaoyang explained that it was through consuming human flesh, which was the most direct way for zombies or mutants to gain abilities and evolve. Hong Lu then asked if they would also have to eat human flesh to survive the apocalypse. Xiaoyang clarified that it was only the most direct method, but there was another better way. He then showed them a type of glowing core. He explained that whether it was an evolved human or a zombie, everyone with special abilities was a mutant and needed to absorb exotic energy to evolve. He said all kinds of meat and blood contain a bit of that energy, even if only in small amounts, which was still better than nothing. The rare mutants and evolved ones had that energy much more condensed in their bodies. He added that as the apocalypse intensified, more mutant zombies and exotic cores would appear. Hong Lu asked if zombies also had that energy and if they could just eat zombie meat. Zhang immediately rejected the idea, saying he would not eat that. Xiaoyang explained that normal people could not eat zombie meat because they would get infected. Only mutants like Chong could evolve that way. Then suddenly, the system announced that the Mission Nemesis Villain Volume 2 was complete, earning Xiaoyang another 50 points and bringing his total to 126. He thought to himself that since there were no more enemy survivors around, there was no immediate threat left. But at that moment, a zombie rushed to attack him, and Xiaoyang easily brought it down without giving a chance. That zombie had approached without making any sound, showing it was special. Xiaoyang took a core from inside it and offered it to Zhang and Hong Lu. Jinong refused, but Hong Lu decided to consume both cores at once because he wanted to get stronger. Soon after, he really felt much more powerful. Xiaoyang remarked that Hong Lu would become an evolved, but even so, his strength still would not be enough to dominate the apocalypse. Hong Li promised he would not get arrogant. With the immediate danger gone, Xiaoyang decided that everyone would return to the base. Meanwhile, at the steel mill to the east, the people stationed at the base noticed a group approaching. The man leading the group introduced himself as the third boss of the coal mine and asked if they remembered him. The first guard stated that he would report the situation to the leader. A bald man wanted to know what the third boss was doing there, while a woman beside him inquired about the whereabouts of Rue and the second boss. The third boss explained that they had been attacked and killed. Upon hearing this, the bald man authorized their entry and ordered his subordinates to take the group to a safe dormitory. Later, inside that dormitory within the steel mill, one of the subordinates from the coal mine confessed that he had a bad feeling about the situation. While the boss tried to dismiss it as mere paranoia, the subordinate insisted that the place looked more like a prison because it featured iron bars. Soon, a man appeared and ordered everyone to come out. They found themselves completely surrounded by the steel mill soldiers. The mine boss asked what they wanted from them. A woman wearing glasses asked what should happen to someone who betrayed their own leader. The third boss denied any betrayal, claiming that Rue had died in an attack and that the situation was all a misunderstanding. The woman demanded clarifications and asked a man named Li Chong to explain everything he knew. Li Chong stated that he had gone to the coal mine and seen Rue's body, while the second boss was completely missing. He noted that the entire area showed signs of a major battle. According to him, the only plausible explanation was that the subordinates had turned against Rue. The third boss retorted that there was no proof of that accusation. The bald man laughed at the idea of needing proof, reminding them that they lived in an apocalypse where such concepts no longer held any value. He admitted that, truthfully, if it weren't for the abilities of Rue and the second boss, they would have taken over the coal mine a long time ago. He also commented that they could simply kill them all right there, but one of the men present suggested sparing them because they possessed valuable information. The woman with glasses showed interest, and the man revealed that there was a base in the east with many people and supplies. He said Rue and the second boss had attempted to attack it, but had lost. He promised to guide the group there if they spared his life. The woman wanted to know how strong that base was compared to theirs. The man replied that it was probably about the same strength, but mentioned that he had not seen any evolved people there. The bald man asked how they had lost the battle. The man then explained that the other group possessed heavy, high-caliber weapons. The woman considered this to be excellent information, but still ordered all of them to be executed. They begged for mercy, but they were all killed. In that way, the coal mine was left with no survivors. The steel mill's boss asked what their next move would be. They concluded that they should eliminate that threat as soon as possible. The woman warned that attacking suddenly would be risky since the enemy had heavy weapons. She decided the best course of action was to gather information first and evolve so that they could face them safely. She ordered scouts to be sent out to gather intelligence on the enemy. Meanwhile, Xiaoyang was reviewing his system, evaluating what he could buy with the 126 points he had accumulated. In the shop, there was a level 1 supply box and a level 2 black tech box available for a total of 55 points. Xiaoyang remarked that those boxes were very good and purchased both, which left him with 71 points remaining. In the supply box, he found 500 kilos of premium lotus root powder, 200 kilos of cocoa butter cakes, and 150 liters of cooking oil. In the level 2 black technology box, he obtained 20 more units of physical enhancement serum. He wasted no time and used the serum on himself immediately. Suddenly, Shan entered the room, warning him that a very suspicious person had appeared at the base. This man identified himself as a messenger and assured the guards he was not an enemy, asking specifically to speak with the leader. When questioned, he confirmed he was looking for Xiaoyang. As soon as Xiaoyang showed up, the messenger's tone changed, becoming much more friendly. He introduced himself as Shu Axing, claiming to be from the steel mill to the west. Uncle Song reacted with surprise upon hearing the name. He explained to Xiaoyang that the largest steel mill in the region was located to the west near the coal mine, and it currently functioned as a large survival base just a few kilometers away. Xiaoyang asked Shu Axing why he had come specifically to their base. Shu Axing replied that the world was very chaotic and that since they were all survivors, they should unite. He stated he'd been sent by his leader to recruit new allies, but Kai warned Xiaoyang not to trust him, noting the man had been prowling the area with a map and inspecting everything. Xiaoyang analyzed the map and used his mind's eye to assess Shu Axing, concluding that he was not trustworthy at all. Without hesitation, he pointed his pistol at the man's head, making it clear he knew his true intentions. He demanded that Shu Axing tell the truth or die right there. Shu Axing justified his actions by saying they were just being cautious and did not want enemies. Xiaoyang then asked Zhang if they had any record of him, and Zhang said they did not. In the end, Xiaoyang ordered Shu Axing to leave. Everyone was a little surprised by the decision, but Xiaoyang had a plan. He handed the map back to the messenger and let him go, thinking to himself that the steel mill could be worth a lot of points in the system. The story then moves forward 5 months later. At the steel mill, there were rumors that people were disappearing again. Some men suspected that the known monster was active once more. When they approached the dump, they heard a strange noise and decided to wait for the guards to check it out. However, before they could do anything, one of them was struck in the neck with a knife. They immediately warned Li Chang that there was a monster in the dump. When Li Chang heard this, he asked if it was the tentacle man. They said it had to be him since the creature was behind a pile of trash. Even so, Li Chang found the sudden, unannounced attack suspicious and ordered everyone to hide. He instructed those with evolved abilities to follow him. He set off with a squad of evolved people, telling them to flee if they were caught off guard. After they searched the entire perimeter, they found nothing but footprints left behind. Li Chang reflected that since the coal mine had closed, many people had gone missing at the steel mill. Previously, there were 3 bases for the monster to attack, but now only their base remained. Still, he concluded that it wasn't the tentacle man. Meanwhile, at Xiaoyang's base, he reflected on the fact that he had survived much longer than in his previous life and realized that rebuilding civilization was not an impossible task. This was his mission, to establish a utopia and expand his community as much as possible. He noted that months had passed without any new system missions involving the steel mill. It was at this time that Shan returned to the base. Xiaoyang asked her and Zhang if they had noticed anything unusual during their hunting operation. They replied that they had not, noting that with their current strength, no one even realized they were the ones responsible for the killings. Xiaoyang also inquired about how Xiaoyu had performed on the mission, and they reported that he was adapting well, even reaching the point of killing a zombie on his own. His mother confirmed this with pride. Xiaoyang considered this excellent and reminded the group to save all the mutant cores they had collected. Finally, a new mission titled Nemesis Villain Volume 3 appeared for Xiaoyang, with the goal of eliminating all threats and assisting potential allies, offering a reward of 80 points. Xiaoyang wondered if the system was referring to the people at the steel mill and whether he would truly have to help them. Later, during a meeting, Hong Li remarked that it would be very dangerous for Xiaoyang to infiltrate that location alone. Uncle Song explained that over the last 5 months, the people from a steel mill had continued to send spies and scouts to probe their base. He warned that if Xiaoyang went in alone, he would be an easy target. Despite this, Xiaoyang stated that with his current strength, it would be difficult for anyone to hurt him. Furthermore, he explained that the purpose of the mission was to determine if there were any potential allies inside. He expressed trust in his team to defend the fortress in his absence, stating they would not allow the base to be invaded as long as they were alive. Back at the steel mill, Li Chang was outside the boss's door attempting to deliver an urgent report. The guard, however, stated that no one was permitted to enter except for the 2 leaders. Impatient, Li Chang lunged at the man and grabbed him by the neck. He then apologized, realizing he was losing control of his own body, something that had been occurring since he began evolving. The leader in the room, Ling, ordered them to let him in. She listened to Li Chang's report, in which he explained his theory that the disappearances were not the work of the tentacle man. He noted that he had found women's footprints at the crime scenes, even though none of the victims were women. Ling understood that this pointed to the possibility of another killer among them. She warned him not to spread this information, as the people were already terrified of the tentacle man and a rumor of another killer would cause panic. She moved closer to ask if he had a plan, but an embarrassed Li Chang said no and left the room, realizing afterward that he had forgotten to ask something else. Inside the office, Ling spoke with another boss whom Li Chang had not noticed. This man asked if the presence of female footprints was confirmed. Ling noted they would have more work ahead, and the man agreed, remarking that he killed while she cleaned up, his favorite arrangement since he liked to drain bodies. Meanwhile, Xiaoyang approached the steel mill, killing a horde of zombies along the way. Knowing he was close to his destination, he prepared a disguise. He cut his hair slightly, smeared dirt on his face, changed his clothes, and put on glasses. When he reached the entrance of the steel mill, a guard stopped him and asked who he was. Xiaoyang, in character, claimed he was alone and had finally found a base of survivors to ask for help. The guard asked how he had survived alone for so long, and Xiaoyang explained that his previous base of 10 people had been wiped out by a horde, leaving him as the sole survivor. The guard commented that he must be quite strong, to which Xiaoyang humbly replied that he had gained some strength from surviving many attacks. Even so, the guard made it clear that he would have to pass a test to enter. Xiaoyang thought the people there were not very friendly. At that moment, Li Chang appeared and asked about the newcomer. The guard explained he was a lone survivor and that he planned to take him to an evaluation area. Xiaoyang became suspicious, thinking they might want to kill him in an isolated spot. However, Li Chang surprised him by saying he could enter and even pick up more weapons if he wished. Xiaoyang asked if he could trust them, fearing he might be shot upon entry. Li Chang replied that being cautious was normal in the apocalypse and that they were not forcing anyone to stay. If he didn't want to, he could leave. Xiaoyang agreed and handed over his weapons to be searched, thinking that Li Chang seemed to have some principles and was not a complete monster. He also noticed the people at the steel mill were less savage than the Bichue group. Li Chang asked if he had survived using only a knife and whether he was an evolved. Xiaoyang maintained his disguise and pretended not to know what that meant, though he actually felt much stronger than Li Chang. Li Chang explained a rule of the base. Evolved people had to report to the boss first. For that reason, Xiaoyang was taken to a reception room that resembled a prison cell. Sometime later, the bald boss appeared, looked at him suspiciously, and asked for his name. Xiaoyang introduced himself as Zhang Ye. The boss asked if he was an evolved, his tone suggesting he already suspected it. To test him, the boss threw an axe at him. Xiaoyang barely dodged and realized this was the test. He complained that he could have died if he wasn't evolved. The bald man confirmed this coldly, stating the death of an ordinary human would be no loss. He explained that evolved people needed to stick together and said it was good for Xiaoyang to know who he really was. He warned that few in the base knew this secret and ordered Xiaoyang to keep it confidential, threatening to kill him if he told anyone. In an intimidating move, he nearly grabbed Xiaoyang by the neck, but Xiaoyang managed to dodge. Xiaoyang thought he could kill the man at that moment, but was unsure if the system would reward him yet. The boss, noticing his reflexes, admitted he had good skills, but explained that the power of an evolved went far beyond that. He then ordered the guard to take Xiaoyang to an empty room and provide new clothes. Afterward, Xiaoyang was introduced to other important members of the base. He met Depang, who held as much power as the leader, Huan Ling, both of whom were responsible for maintaining control. Huan Ling remarked that he was lucky to have found the base and would no longer have to worry about surviving alone, but she explained that to eat and sleep there, he would have to prove his worth. Xiaoyang accepted and promised to follow orders. Bin, another officer, explained that he had arrived at the right time because they were about to go out on patrol and Xiaoyang would be joining them. Later on, the same guard who had welcomed Xiaoyang at the gate was part of the team and casually asked Bin about this new member. Bin simply said there wasn't really a choice since the order had come directly from the boss. Meanwhile, Axing kept staring at Xiaoyang, feeling like his face looked oddly familiar. As they moved forward, Bin quietly explained to Xiaoyang that he had to keep his evolved status completely secret. Inside the base, only the two leaders, Depang and Huan Ling, knew the truth about evolving through eating human flesh. Apart from them, there were only 4 evolved members in total. Bin himself, Axing, Akiang, and Depang, and all of them were family. Axing was Bin's brother, Depang was their cousin, and both of them were nephews of Hong Ling, so the secret stayed within the family. Bin made it clear that if this secret ever leaked, everyone would immediately assume Xiaoyang was responsible. Hearing this, Xiaoyang recalled seeing Axing pass by his old base about 5 months ago. He then asked about another officer, and Bin explained that it was Li Chang, a highly talented and powerful foreigner, but someone who had no knowledge of their secret. Bin warned him again that if the truth ever got out, Xiaoyang would be killed without hesitation. Xiaoyang internally admitted that Chang did seem incredibly capable, and that with more resources or proper support, he could easily surpass the other leaders. Soon, the group arrived at a small survivor base. According to their intel, there were only 7 people inside, none of them evolved and barely armed. Xiaoyang couldn't help but wonder why they were targeting such weak people, but Bin clarified that they weren't planning to kill them outright, they intended to recruit them. Akiang then added that since Xiaoyang was now evolved, he needed to start changing his mindset. In their eyes, they were no longer ordinary humans, but a superior species standing at the very top of the food chain. Xiaoyang questioned whether they planned to recruit people only to eventually send them to the slaughterhouse, but Bin explained that not everyone would be recruited. Some would be killed immediately, depending on how valuable they were. For now, he told Xiaoyang to just observe and learn. Meanwhile, the survivors of the small base were busy building a wall when they suddenly spotted a massive horde of zombies heading straight toward them. Panic kicked in, and they tried to defend themselves using their weak weapons, but it wasn't enough, and some of them were killed. Watching this, Xiaoyang quickly realized how cruel the plan was and started wondering if the real intention was to lure zombies in and weaken these people. Bin didn't deny it and admitted that their resources were limited, so they couldn't afford to accept everyone. Instead, they let the zombies wipe out the weaker ones and only took in those who were actually valuable. Just as a woman was about to get caught by the zombies, Akiang suddenly stepped in and saved her, killing all the enemies around her. Soon, the rest of the evolved squad joined in, finishing off the zombies and rescuing the remaining survivors. They introduced themselves as evolved humans from the steel mill and claimed they had come to save them, which made the survivors feel relieved and grateful. Seeing their strength, Xiaoyang estimated that they were roughly at the level of 20 strength attribute points, similar to Jiang from his own group. Suddenly, Xiaoyang sensed a terrifying presence coming from a nearby building, but when he turned to look, there was nothing there, so he brushed it off as his imagination. Shortly after, he was called to help with the work, but in reality, something was indeed hiding inside that building, the infamous mutant known as the Tentacle Man. At the same time, the survivors mentioned they had some supplies stored inside. Bin then assigned Xiaoyang the task of collecting all the supplies, loading them onto a truck, and also gathering the bodies to take later, while Bin himself left with the rest of the survivors. Xiaoyang saw this as a perfect chance to be alone. Meanwhile, the rescued survivors felt relieved and happy, with one of the women even asking if there would be water to bathe, only to be told there would even be hot water available. Suddenly, Axing noticed something strange in the distance, and Bin immediately ordered everyone to stay alert. Akiang stood protectively in front of the rescued woman, telling her to stay behind him. But Axing strongly felt that something dangerous was approaching even though no one else could see anything. He insisted he wasn't wrong, but in the very next moment, a tentacle pierced straight through his neck. The hidden monster had revealed itself and was ready to slaughter everyone present. At that moment, Xiaoyang was some distance away, collecting zombie cores and thinking that getting 2 of them was already a decent result, when he suddenly heard distant screams. The Tentacle Man had begun attacking the group. Bin was instantly captured by the tentacles and brutally killed, his body crushed completely. The others were filled with fear, and even Akiang couldn't react in time, realizing he had no way to deal with such a creature. Instead of running away on his own, he cowardly pushed the woman forward so she could escape first. Just as she was about to be killed by the tentacles, Xiaoyang suddenly appeared, slicing through all of them and saving her. Looking at the creature, Xiaoyang wondered if this was the famous tentacle monster everyone talked about. Akiang clarified that it wasn't the original, but one of its offspring. He explained that the real tentacle monster had the ability to transform normal humans into smaller tentacled creatures, continuously creating such offspring. Although these were weaker than the original, they were still extremely dangerous, and even Akiang admitted that facing the real monster would be very difficult. Even so, Akiang noticed that Xiaoyang alone was able to deal serious damage to the creature. Amid the chaos, Akiang decided to run away, claiming he would bring reinforcements, while the other survivors followed him. Deep down, he knew that getting reinforcements was just an excuse to leave Xiaoyang alone with the monster, but he didn't care. Soon after, he was grabbed by multiple tentacles at once, yet he remained calm and began analyzing the creature, finding its nature quite interesting. Using a clever move, Akiang turned the creature's own tentacles against it and realized that despite its appearance, he had far greater weight and strength. Taking this opportunity, he decided to activate his physical overdrive ability, something he hadn't tested before. The moment he activated it, his strength increased massively, allowing him to drag the monster violently across the ground. Then, with a brutal pull, he tore off all its tentacles and completely decapitated it. The woman nearby was terrified, not of the dead monster, but of Akiang himself. Seeing her reaction, Akiang reminded himself that he was still human and not a monster. At that point, reinforcements finally arrived, with Depaying and Huanling leading them. After assessing the situation, Akiang informed them that their comrades had been killed by the offspring of the tentacle monster. Chong then asked about the new guy, assuming Xiaoyang had also died since even the 3 of them hadn't been able to defeat such a creature. Hearing this, Depaying became furious, calling everyone useless and even killing the first soldier he saw as an example. However, at that exact moment, Xiaoyang appeared and threw the remains of the monster he had killed alone onto the ground. Chong and Hongling were clearly surprised to see that he was still alive. Hongling confirmed that those remains indeed belonged to the tentacle monster's offspring. Xiaoyang coldly stated that he had killed the creature and avenged their fallen companions. The leaders exchanged looks, questioning whether he was truly that strong. Xiaoyang then added that besides taking the creature's body, they should also prepare a truck to transport the supplies from the rescued group. Later, during a private meeting, Depaying asked Akiang if he truly believed that the monster was stronger than Chong. Akiang confirmed it, explaining that his own brothers had been killed instantly and admitting that even he and Chong would struggle to defeat such a creature. Depaying reflected on this and acknowledged that the newcomer did seem unusually capable, recalling that Xiaoyang had already shown exceptional reflexes in a previous private interaction. However, Huanling warned them not to exaggerate, suggesting that the others might have simply been caught off guard by an ambush. At that moment, Li Chong entered the room to offer condolences for the deaths. Depaying accepted it coldly, stating that in the apocalypse, everyone must be prepared to lose loved ones, and then asked him to get straight to the point. Li Chong said that he believed Xiaoyang was as strong as him and suggested making him an officer. Depeng immediately rejected the idea, saying they knew nothing about Xiaoyang's background and couldn't trust him. Hong Ling, however, tried to calm things down, admitting that Xiaoyang had the strength to qualify as an officer, but still needed to prove his loyalty. Li Chong argued that killing the offspring alone should already be enough proof, but Huan Ling responded that while it was impressive, it didn't solve all their problems. She then proposed a plan. They would gather the strongest members of the base and hunt down the original tentacle monster together. Later, Xiaoyang overheard the entire plan and thought about how he had just arrived, yet was already being assigned such a dangerous mission. He questioned whether this was really the right move. Hong Ling reassured him that there was no issue since he had the strength to handle it. Depeng even added that if the mission succeeded, Xiaoyang could become the third in command. He asked Chang if he had any problem with being outranked by the newcomer, but Chang showed no objection. Finally, Depeng decided that everyone would set out for the mission in 2 days. However, Xiaoyang found the proposal suspiciously straightforward for people who didn't seem to fully understand the danger. Using his mind's eye, he looked into their true intentions and realized that deep down, the two leaders actually wanted him dead, while Chang remained completely indifferent, neither liking nor disliking him. Later that night, close to midnight, Kai gathered everyone together and announced that Xiaoyang had contacted them through the radio. Hong Li took the call and asked how things were going over there. Xiaoyang told him that the important mission would happen the day after tomorrow at the South Suburban Park. He asked them to bring all the strongest people from the base, including Chong, because the time had come to completely wipe out the threat at the steel mill. After hearing that, Hong Li began organizing the group and decided that Grandpa Shan, even though he was highly skilled, could not go. He was simply too old, and the mission would be too dangerous for him. Grandpa Shan accepted that decision without complaint, saying he would stay behind to guard the base and wishing the others good luck. Hong Li then put the team together. The youngest boy also wanted to join, but his mother protested, saying the mission was only for adults. The boy argued back that he needed to prepare for the apocalypse and that he was not a child anymore. Song told the mother to calm down, reminding her that the boy was already capable of killing zombies by himself. In the end, Hong Li agreed and said he actually liked the idea, believing it would be good for the boy to gain experience as early as possible. When the day of the operation arrived, everyone finally assembled with the leaders Li Chong and Xiaoyang, prepared for the mission that could decide all of their fates. Xiaoyang was uneasy, wondering whether his people would really be able to get him out of there when the time came, but Depeng assured him that he already had a plan. As Xiaoyang observed the building, he noticed his own group positioned above with binoculars and long-range weapons, ready to move at the right moment. Hong Li reminded everyone that it had been Xiaoyang himself who insisted that no one should remain close to the park. Now, they were preparing ropes so they could descend at the perfect timing and strike the enemy from behind. At the same time, the leaders from the steel mill had brought a child to use as bait, which was obviously cruel. Huan Ling explained that she personally had to take the boy into the park because the tentacle monster kept calling for its son. Their idea was to use that false hope to lure it out and then attack at the right moment, while making sure the child would not actually be harmed. Even so, the child resisted and said he did not want to be used as bait. Depeng got angry, accused the boy of disobeying the leaders, and then threw him into the park. Right then, Hong Li gave the signal for everyone to descend. The child screamed for help, and soon the roar of the monster echoed through the area as it called for its son. Li Chong warned everyone that the monster had shown up and that it was time to rescue the child. He tried to move forward, but the leaders stopped him, saying it was not the right moment yet, because they wanted Xiaoyang to handle it. Xiaoyang moved ahead without hesitation, reached the child, and threw him out of danger. But the tentacle monster immediately caught Xiaoyang and demanded that its son be returned. At that moment, Xiaoyang recognized the creature and fully understood how serious the situation had become. Li Chong kept shouting at him to hold on while trying to break free from the leaders who were restraining him. Li Chong questioned their plan, saying that if Xiaoyang was not helped, the newcomer would die. But Huan Ling coldly answered that this was part of the plan from the start. They wanted to test whether the boy was truly strong enough to handle one of the tentacle monster's offspring alone. If he died, then to them, he had only been disposable. Li Chong was furious when he realized this had all been planned beforehand and demanded to know why. Xiaoyang then exposed their secret, revealing that they were cannibals who ate human flesh. Hearing that, Li Chong was completely shocked. Then the gunfire started, exposing the ambush. Hong Li and the others from the base opened fire with everything they had. At the same time, Xiaoyu and the rest of the team hurled Molotov cocktails at the tentacle monster. As the monster moved forward, it suddenly noticed the child and reacted with surprise. The creature was actually Shengzi, someone Xiaoyang recognized. The frightened boy said that the monster was extremely strong, yet the creature still tried to calm him down. Zhang warned everyone to be careful because this was no ordinary zombie. Then Qinchong moved in and displayed incredible skill, dodging the tentacles with ease. Meanwhile, the evolved members from the steel mill scrambled to take cover from the barrage of gunfire. Huan Ling asked whether the enemy side also had a mutant and wondered how a mutant could possibly be fighting alongside humans. Chong had entered an absurdly powerful state. Even when all the tentacles wrapped around him, he could simply break free as though it meant nothing. Even though the fight was still difficult, Xiaoyang watched with satisfaction because Chong had finally found an opponent worthy of him. Depaying then wondered out loud if the rookie had been pretending all this time. Xiaoyang, meanwhile, easily sliced through the monster's tentacles and freed himself. At that point, Qiang suddenly realized something important. He remembered that they had once talked about the leader of the eastern base, the same man who had massacred the people at the coal mine, and that leader's name was Xiaoyang. Depaying immediately understood that they had been deceived. Ling then concluded that the entire enemy force had to be Xiaoyang's people. Everyone surrounding the area and fighting the monster was made up of his strongest allies, the same ones who had defeated Rue and taken over the coal mine. She quickly realized they had no guarantee of victory, and that even if they somehow won, they would suffer massive losses. Qiang asked what they were supposed to do, and Ling told Depaying to cover her because she was about to take decisive action. Depaying hurled his axe with such force that it caused an explosion in the forest, forcing Hong Li's group backward and creating an opening. Ling used that moment to rush towards Xiaoyu. Kai tried to protect the boy, but Ling kicked him so hard that he was sent flying, exposing the fact that she too was evolved. She grabbed the little boy and declared that he was the answer to everything. Even after recognizing that the boy had skill, she still punched him in the face. That made Shang Zi even more furious, and he roared in rage. Chong seized the distraction and grabbed the monster by the neck, but Xiaoyang remained calm and told everyone that the monster would not attack them now because it would never risk the child's life. Ling then threatened to kill Xiaoyu if they did not all drop their weapons. Hong Li begged her to take him hostage instead, but Ling noticed their desperation and realized she had targeted the right weakness. Hong Li could only think about how he would explain it to the boy's mother if anything happened to him. Even so, Ling forced everyone to lay down their weapons, and Hong Li obeyed. She then ordered Xiaoyang to use the monster he had brought to kill the tentacle monster. But before anyone could predict it, the enemy launched a sudden attack so quickly that only Ling and Depaying managed to dodge in time. Qiang and the others in their group died instantly. Ling had not expected that outcome at all. She had believed that once Xiaoyu was captured, the tentacle monster would become obedient. But Xiaoyang only smiled while he and Chong watched without showing even the slightest concern. Hong Li panicked as he saw the tentacle monster reaching for Xiaoyu, but Xiaoyang calmly assured him that the boy was not in danger. And when the creature finally reached him, it simply called him son. That was the moment Xiaoyang revealed the truth and said the creature's real name was Shangzi. He reminded the monster that he had kept his promise to protect its wife and child. The boy, completely confused, asked whether that creature was really his father, and Xiaoyang confirmed that it was. That meant his earlier suspicions had been right. Shangzi was not just some monster, but a mutant, just like Chong. The boy's very first reaction, after realizing this monster was truly his father, was to hug him tightly because he had missed him so deeply. Depaying could not hide his shock at the bizarre scene unfolding in front of him, and he ordered the remaining people in his group to retreat. But Shangzi had no intention of letting them escape that easily. He grabbed the bald man and prepared to slaughter him. Meanwhile, Ling chose not to help and instead tried to flee as well. She had already decided that even if she fought together with Depaying, they still had no chance of defeating those monsters, so escaping was the only option left. But a tentacle caught up with her, smashed her face into the ground, and dragged her right back. Depaying laughed at her with contempt and said she deserved it. He then looked at Li Chong and said that now it was just the two of them, so they had to cut through the tentacles together. But before anything else happened, Xiaoyang silently appeared behind Li Chong and warned him not to move, promising that if he cooperated, he would leave alive. Li Chong did nothing to help. Depaying was then yanked away violently, his face smashing so hard into the ground that his nose broke, his forehead split open, and several of his teeth were knocked out before he was finally torn apart. Ling ended up meeting an equally horrific death, getting crushed until she was reduced to little more than a pile of meat. After seeing everything that had happened, Xiaoyang concluded that the mission called Nemesis Volume 3 had been successfully completed, with all potential threats eliminated. He received 80 points for it, raising his total to 151. The so-called potential allies mentioned in the mission turned out to be Shangzi and Li Chong. Xiaoyang then asked Li Chong if he still had any doubts about why all of this had been done. Li Chong first wanted to confirm whether they were truly from the eastern base, and Xiaoyang confirmed that they were. He then brought up the disturbing topic of evolving by eating human flesh. Xiaoyang explained that evolved individuals didn't just appear randomly. Reaching that level of strength required consuming human flesh. Hearing this, Li Chong was struck with horror as he recalled how he had once fed meat to a starving mother and her daughter, not knowing where it had come from. The realization hit him that he might have unknowingly been serving human flesh to people all along. He then remembered a tense moment during the earlier tentacle monster incident, realizing that the woman's daughter hadn't been killed by the monster, but had instead been taken to the slaughterhouse. Just imagining that made him feel sick, and he ended up vomiting from sheer disgust. Overcome with anger, he walked over to Depaying's corpse and smashed it into pieces. After that, he turned to Xiaoyang and asked whether the people at his base also became stronger through such a disgusting method. Hongli immediately answered no, assuring him that they didn't follow that path. Xiaoyang then explained that their group used a completely different method. He tossed a zombie core to Li Chong and told him to examine it, explaining that mutant zombie cores could also help people evolve. Although this method wasn't as common or as easy as consuming human flesh, it was far more effective and didn't come with those horrible side effects. He further explained that people who used the human flesh method became increasingly violent, lost control over their emotions, and developed strong murderous tendencies. Li Chong admitted that this matched what he had been experiencing himself. Xiaoyang warned him that there was no complete cure, because once someone started down that path, the effects would stay with them for life. However, if he stopped now, the symptoms could still improve over time. After that, Xiaoyang turned toward Shengzi and asked if they could talk. Shengzi, still struggling to speak properly, thanked Xiaoyang for saving his son, managing to express himself with great effort. Xiaoyang understood him without difficulty and explained to the others that Shengzi, much like Chong, could still communicate in a primitive way while retaining his memories, even though his physical form had become terrifying. Even so, Shengzi reassured him that he was fine and that there was no need to worry about his son anymore, because he was safe. Xiaoyang then asked whether he wanted to stay there, since he was already familiar with that place. Shengzi agreed, and even praised Xiaoyang for being intelligent and quick to understand everything. Finally, Xiaoyang turned back to Li Chong and said that now that all the threats had been removed, the remaining survivors at the steel mill would need to be dealt with. However, Li Chong admitted that he no longer trusted himself, since he had consumed human flesh and feared that he might lose control at any moment. Xiaoyang thought about this and said that they might consider recruiting those survivors in the future, but first they would need to discuss it with the group. For now, he told Li Chong that he would return to the base with them, assuring him that he would keep a close watch on him in case anything went wrong, and told him not to worry. Meanwhile, at the border of City S, a massive horde of mutant zombies had created a thick and unusual fog that covered the entire area. A group of survivors was desperately trying to rescue the last companion they had left behind, but they soon realized there was no saving him. Not only had he been torn apart by the zombies, but he had also turned into one of them. One of the survivors, completely exhausted, admitted that she couldn't run anymore, while another insisted that if they stopped even for a moment, they would all die. After pushing themselves with great effort, they finally felt the wind on their faces and realized they had reached the border. Without wasting time, they kept running until they saw the moonlight, feeling a brief sense of relief after escaping that suffocating fog. However, that moment of calm didn't last long. A carnivorous plant like zombie suddenly attacked them and killed one of the women, making the situation even more grim. One of the survivors broke down crying over her death, but despite that, they had no choice but to keep moving forward. Now only 4 of them remained. As they continued running, they knew the mutant zombies were still chasing them. The man leading the group eventually recognized the area and said they had reached the park in City M, although they felt some relief upon arriving. One of them pointed out that the place felt strange and completely abandoned. The leader tried to explain it by saying the city had probably been evacuated. Soon after, they noticed a figure in the distance that looked like another survivor, but it turned out to be Shengzi. The group immediately panicked and ran away, even though Shengzi didn't chase them and simply stood there, indifferent to their escape. One of the black-haired survivors wondered why a plant-type monster would appear outside the forest, and at that exact moment, a horde of plant zombies emerged again, completely surrounding them. Some of the survivors began to accept their deaths. One of them collapsed to the ground crying, while another raised his gun, ready to end his own life before being devoured. Suddenly, tentacles appeared and saved them. It was Shengzi, who stepped in and wiped out the entire horde of monsters without leaving any behind. Later, back at the base, Xiaoyang casually commented that it had been a very windy day. Thinking about everything that had happened, he received another 20 points for completing the Utopia mission and an additional 60 points as extra rewards, bringing his total to 231 points. He then decided to check the system's new shop, where he found 3 main options: a level 2 weapons box costing 20 points, a level 3 superpowered awakening box costing 100 points, and a level 2 black technology box costing 50 points. Curious, Xiaoyang wondered if there was another level 3 box available, since last time he had obtained physical overload and was eager to see what he might get this time. Without hesitation, he bought all 3 boxes. From the level 2 weapons box, he received an armored jeep. From the superpowered awakening box, he gained a new ability called Imprisonment Mark, which allowed him to place a slavery seal on a target and turn them into a servant, although he could only control one person at a time. From the black technology box, he obtained a plus 30 physical enhancement serum. Even with these rewards, Xiaoyang was most interested in his new ability. Since Chong and Li Chong were currently stable, he decided to wait before choosing how to use it. At that moment, the Utopia mission updated. Now, he needed to upgrade the base's defenses into a fully independent automatic security system that would function even without his presence. He also received a new mission called Pest Control, which required him to eliminate the mutant plant threats in exchange for 100 reward points. He even joked to himself, thinking the system was basically telling him to start a vegetable garden. Not long after, someone reported over the radio that Shang Zi was returning to the base carrying something. When Shang Zi arrived, people were initially frightened by his huge and intimidating appearance, but they soon realized he was likely on Xiaoyang's side, especially since Xiaoyang already had another zombie ally. Shang Zi felt a bit uneasy under everyone's suspicious stares, but calmed down when his wife and son came forward to greet him. He called his son and referred to his wife awkwardly as "marry me," which confused everyone. Xiaoyang found his way of speaking strange at first, but with some help from the others, understood that Shang Zi meant wife, since his brain was still not fully clear. After an emotional reunion filled with tight hugs, Shang Zi explained the situation in more detail. He told Xiaoyang that those strange creatures had been appearing in the park where he stayed. One of the survivors who had come with him added that they were from City S and that those creatures had been chasing them all the way from there. They explained that the mutants had merged with the forest itself. Xiaoyang quickly realized that these were the same creatures mentioned in his mission. The survivor also said, still shaken, that some of their companions had turned into those plant-like zombies. In response, Xiaoyang ordered Chong to strengthen the base's defenses and then asked for volunteers to deal with the situation alongside him. In the end, Xiaoyang, the black-haired survivor, Zhang, and Shanshan prepared themselves to depart. During their discussion, the survivor mentioned that those vines used to be much smaller. Xiaoyang explained that they would have to enter the forest, even though it was clearly enemy territory, and no one liked the idea. Still, he emphasized that if they didn't eliminate the problem at its source, it would continue spreading. Before setting out, he made it clear that there was something important to do first. Zhang and Shanshan needed to become stronger to handle this kind of threat. Over the next few days, they would go out hunting to improve their abilities. Later on, a strange aquatic-looking mutant appeared and began devouring a corpse, but Xiaoyang didn't hesitate for even a second and cut it clean in half with a precise strike. Not long after, the people from the base arrived carrying heavy weapons to control the horde, and they managed to collect a large number of mutant zombie cores. Nearby, another unknown mutant was wandering around, but unlike the others, it had completely lost interest in hunting zombies and now craved only human flesh. It tracked the group by their scent, complaining that it had been a long time since it had eaten real humans, although it also noted with irritation that the survivors were heavily armed. Later, Xiaoyang used his system points to strengthen the group and began distributing the zombie cores among them. After that, everyone gathered together to discuss their next steps. Xiaoyang explained that in just 3 days of hunting, they had managed to collect a significant number of cores. He then stated that the first ones to receive them would be Hongli and the others who did not have weapons. Hongli immediately objected, saying it wasn't fair, and Zhang supported him, pointing out that everyone had fought together equally. However, Xiaoyang remained firm and made it clear there would be no debate. He explained that those without weapons needed to be strengthened first since they had no means to defend themselves, while the others were already capable of protecting themselves better. He assured them that once they obtained more cores, everyone would eventually reach the same level of strength. Song, one of the older members, stepped in and encouraged Hongli not to feel embarrassed, reminding him that he had always been a good leader and deserved this support. After that, Xiaoyang called Shanshan aside to speak privately. She felt a bit suspicious and asked what they were going to do there. Meanwhile, the rest of the group couldn't control their curiosity and secretly tried to listen in. Chong even made a teasing remark, suggesting that maybe Xiaoyang was about to hurt her, which only made things more suspicious. Suddenly, Xiaoyang opened the door, having already noticed them trying to eavesdrop. When he saw everyone gathered there, he immediately dragged Zhang into the room and shoved him forcefully. In reality, Xiaoyang was giving Shan Shan an injection to enhance her abilities and prepare her for future battles. He explained that aside from himself and the mutants, Zhang and Shan Shan were currently the strongest fighters in the base. Zhang admitted that this was all thanks to their leader. Xiaoyang then decided to test Shan Shan's new strength against Zhang. Zhang was uncomfortable with the idea because he didn't like fighting women, but Xiaoyang insisted. He told Zhang that if he didn't want to strike back, then Shan Shan should use her full strength since Zhang could handle it. When Shan Shan slapped him, the force was so intense that it nearly tore his head apart. Zhang was sent flying, and Chong along with Kai had to catch him to prevent him from crashing even harder. Xiaoyang revealed that he had injected Shan Shan with a physical enhancement serum, which made her one of the strongest in terms of raw physical power. Zhang complained that he should have received the serum first, but Kai mocked him, joking that Xiaoyang had prioritized a woman and teasing him about it. Later on, Xiaoyang organized a team to eliminate the monstrous plants spreading through the city. The group would include Chong, Zhang, Li Chong, and one of the survivors. That survivor, despite being partly responsible for the situation, had initially agreed to help. However, when the time came, he firmly refused, saying he had barely escaped with his life and had no intention of going back. Li Chong tried to persuade him by saying they were going to rescue his family and companions. But the man replied that there was no one left alive and that he would rather stay at the base and contribute from there. On the other hand, the second survivor who had come with him showed more courage and decided to join Xiaoyang on the mission, even fully aware of the risks involved. In western suburbs, buff evolvers are combing through buildings for someone. Day by day, his brain is functioning slower and slower. If he doesn't get fresh human meat soon, it will only get worse. The banging on his head was interrupted by the sound of banging in the distance. He quickly ran and followed the lustful sounds. Upon opening the metal door of an abandoned building, he was greeted by the sight of two couples going at it like animals in heat. Buffalver cleared his throat to catch their attention and stop the penetration. The foursome immediately recognized him, but they were not happy to see him again. Buffalver assured them that he did not come to this place to steal anything this time. In fact, he came over to share information. The women did not trust his worst at all. Everybody here had bitten the bullet and embraced being half monsters. There is no point in lying. Buff Evolver swore that he was not lying. He found a community of pure humans, saw that they were armed to the teeth, and now he's asking for help to hunt. The half-monsters crowded him with their equally buff bodies, evaluating his every word and action. In the end, the half-monsters agreed to trust the words of a thief this once. If the bastard lied, they could just eat him instead. Just like that, he was accepted into the group. With her kitty hanging out, the redhead half-monster welcomed the new addition to their group with something tight and warm. Buff Monster is not one to turn down such a generous offer. Meanwhile, Xiaoyang's expedition team moved deeper into the forest to confront the plant monsters. The survivor who had chosen to join them explained that his girlfriend had been killed by those creatures and that he still believed other survivors might be alive and could be rescued. Xiaoyang quickly arranged their formation to ensure safety. Li Chong covered the rear, Chong and Zhang guarded both sides. The weaker survivors stayed protected in the center, and Xiaoyang led from the front. The man thanked them repeatedly for their help, but Xiaoyang clarified that their main goal was to eliminate the creatures and stop their spread. Suddenly, something wet and sticky landed on Xiaoyang's face, irritating him as he tried to figure out what it was, while the survivor warned him to stay alert. Moments later, a carnivorous plant suddenly grabbed Xiaoyang by the neck and almost devoured him. Even then, he showed no struggle. With overwhelming strength, he pulled the plant closer, tore apart its internal organs, ripped out its tongue, and destroyed its core, effectively killing it. Even as the plant tried to escape, Xiaoyang ordered Shengzi to pull it back effortlessly. Once the creature died, it released a strange mist. Xiaoyang commented on the unusual smell, but when he turned to warn the others, he realized no one else was around. At the same time, the survivor was experiencing something completely different. To him, it looked like everyone had simply fallen asleep. In the middle of the forest, he saw the image of his girlfriend desperately calling out to him. Believing she was alive, he ran toward her, only to be led deeper into the forest. Meanwhile, back at the base, a group of evolved mutants that had been wandering around decided to approach the human settlement. Without any real strategy, one of them immediately attacked the guards. Hearing the commotion, Honli stayed alert. The guards opened fire, but normal bullets had little effect on the attacker's body. Still, Honli managed to land a powerful kick that sent the mutant spinning. Then they switched to AK-47 rifles, and this time the bullets worked, leaving the attacker badly injured. Honli ordered the wounded to be taken straight to the infirmary. The reckless mutant who attacked was dragged back in a near-death state. A woman in a bikini questioned how strong the humans at that base really were. The dying mutant begged for flesh to heal himself, but one of his companions killed him without hesitation and used his body as food for the group. A bald man then asked what their plan was, and the blonde woman responded that they were overcomplicating things. Since they were evolved humans and not zombies, they could simply walk up to the base gate and try talking. Meanwhile, back in City M, the survivor began to feel that something was wrong even while seeing the image of his girlfriend. She kept urging him deeper into the forest, faster and faster. When he finally reached her, she was suddenly decapitated right in front of him. Shocked, he turned to Xiaoyang, who was also under the effect of the mist, and asked why he had killed her. Xiaoyang was confused and had no idea what he was talking about. The survivor still couldn't see things clearly. When the hallucinogenic mist finally wore off, he realized in horror that there had never been any girlfriend at all. It had just been a zombie trying to grab him. Xiaoyang then had to slap Chong to snap him out of the illusion as well. Once everyone regrouped, Li Chong commented that it felt like they had been asleep for days under the effect of that mist. Sheng Zi, still disoriented, mentioned that he had been dreaming about picking up his son from school. From the way Xiaoyang interpreted his words, it was clear he was translating Sheng Zi's rough way of speaking. Xiaoyang concluded that the plant had released a kind of hallucinogenic gas that put them into a hypnotic state. To understand the creature better, Xiaoyang began dissecting it, examining its internal structure to locate a possible mutant core. During this process, he noticed a root growing out from the corpse. When he pulled it from the ground, he realized it was actually a core, an organ-like structure that stored the creature's energy and nutrients. Xiaoyang decided to store it in his inventory for later study. He then asked Jing Kai, the survivor, if he knew anything more about these plant monsters. Jing Kai admitted he didn't know much, only that they devoured any living thing. However, he mentioned that he knew a veteran who specialized in agriculture and forest research, someone who might understand these creatures better. Xiaoyang asked where that person was and whether he was still alive. Jing Kai explained that before fleeing, the veteran had been hiding in a nearby base, although he wasn't sure if he had survived. Even so, Xiaoyang decided it was worth checking and concluded that they would head there next.